Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 7 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as the Akatsuki Mastermind controlling Shinobi history. Let the tale begin. Chapter 176, 2 Tasks. Byakuya didn't believe the group's excuses and walked over to grab the letter. After quickly reading its contents, his face immediately twitched as he found himself unsure where to even start criticizing it. It really was a distress letter from Jeriah. The letter was very straightforward. 2 days ago, Konoha's supply line encountered an issue. The military supplies purchased from Mangekyo were intercepted by Mangekyo ninjas within the borders of the Land of Fire, causing tension on Konoha's battlefront. The Mangekyo ninjas responsible for the ambush were well off with strength, which led Jeriah to request protection from Mangekyo to ensure the safety of the supplies. There was nothing wrong with the letter's content, but the irony was that Byakuya had just mentioned Jeriah would probably seek help. Faced with Yahiko and the others' subtle glances, Byakuya wanted to explain but couldn't find the words. Just moments ago, he had been mocking the old toad Gamamaru as a fraud, and now, he found himself in the same position. In a flash, he had gone through the stages of doubt, understanding, and becoming one himself. After clearing his throat, Byakuya spoke. It seems that Jiraiya-sensei has sent a distress letter quite quickly. The conflict between Kumo and Konoha must be more intense than I had imagined. I believe it won't be long before the war between Konoha and Mangekyo comes to an end. Really? Konan asked with anticipation, as in her mind, Byakuya's words were not speculations or analysis but rather predictions of the future. Feeling awkward, Byakuya set the letter down. At this moment, Yahiko, noticing Byakuya's discomfort, quickly chimed in, when the war ends is still unknown. For now, let's focus on Jiraiya-sensei's request for help. Do you guys agree or disagree with his request? Konan and Nagato exchanged glances and then nodded, saying, we both agree to support Jiraiya-sensei. Byakuya slowly added, it's fine to support Konoha, but that comes with an additional price. Aside from the task of escorting supplies, we should ask if he needs ninjas to assassinate Mangekyo's top fighters. Seeing that everyone was in agreement to support Konoha, Yahiko nodded slightly and then asked Byakuya, Byakuya, do you really plan to send our people to assassinate Mangekyo ninjas? Byakuya, unconcerned, responded, of course. Over the past few days, I've recruited quite a few strong rogue ninjas under my command. This war is the perfect opportunity to test and sharpen them, allowing them to prove their worth. After thinking it over, Yahiko said, be cautious. I know you're very powerful, but remember, there are always stronger people out there. In the ninja world, you never know when a new Kage-level powerhouse might emerge. I'll be careful. You can respond to Konoha, and I'll go back to make the preparations. With that, Byakuya left Mangekyo's office. After returning to the Akatsuki base, Byakuya used his ring to summon the outer members. Currently, there are not many outer members. Aside from Byakuya, who was the leader, there were only Hanzo, Kakuzu, and Sasori. The reason the group was limited to just 4 wasn't because Akatsuki lacked enough Jonin-level members. It was because Byakuya held a philosophy of preferring quality over quantity. The outer members would eventually be tasked with capturing the tailed beasts, so if they didn't even have the strength of elite Jonin, they'd be better off doing logistics work. However, recruiting ninjas at the elite Jonin level was no simple task. At that level, these elite Jonin were just a step away from Kage-level strength. After all, both Kages and elite Jonin fell under the Jonin classification. In Byakuya's memory, the original Akatsuki members had almost all been recruited. Nagato and Konan, being Akatsuki's top leaders, were already accounted for. Kakuzu and Sasori had also been recruited. As for the others like Itachi Uchiha, Haiden, Deidara, Kisame Hashigaki, and Zabuza Momochi, some of them were likely still under 10 years old and might not have even graduated from their ninja academies. Others were still quietly serving in Kirigakura's ANBU, which was under Tobi's control, and would eventually become part of his team. Byakuya didn't have the time or inclination to meddle in that right now. If Byakuya wanted to recruit strong ninjas in a short time, he might have to consider alternative methods. Shisui is a good option, and wandering ninjas like Shino and Hirako, who move between various countries, are also solid choices. Their abilities should be around the Jonin level, and with a bit of training, they could become reliable combat forces. 2 days later, Byakuya received 2 pieces of information. The first was from Mangekyo Tower. Konoha had decided to hire Akatsuki's ninjas to deal with Mangekyo's ninjas. The second message came from Kabuto Yakushi. After a few months of training, Kabuto had become a root ninja and had left Konoha to officially begin his missions. Both pieces of news were extremely useful, especially the one from Kabuto, which pleased Byakuya immensely. Although Kabuto was a war orphan, his talent wasn't any less than Kakashi's, particularly in medical research. His abilities were acknowledged by both Tsunade and Orochimaru. With such potential, whether Kabuto eventually rose to the upper ranks of Konoha or was taken away by Orochimaru, he would be an excellent spy candidate, allowing Byakuya to continuously gather intelligence. After destroying the intelligence scroll, Byakuya went to Akatsuki's training ground. Hanzo, Kakuzu, and Sasori had been waiting for quite some time, their eyes fixed on Byakuya as they awaited his orders. Without any small talk, Byakuya directly said, "The village has accepted Konoha's request for 2 tasks, escorting supplies sold to Konoha and assassinating Jonin from Mangekyo. This mission is very difficult and will have to rely on skilled fighters. So to get to the point, do you want to take on the task of escorting the supplies, or will you join me in hunting Mangekyo ninjas?" After hearing the mission details, the 3 of them pondered for a moment. Hanzo smiled as he walked over to Byakuya's side, saying with a chuckle, "I'm getting old and don't want to stray too far from the village, so I'll take the task of escorting the supplies." Without hesitation, Kakuzu and Sasori went for the other option. "We choose to assassinate the Mangekyo ninjas." Their reasons for choosing the assassination over escorting supplies varied. Kakuzu, being a true bounty hunter, didn't care about the specific mission details. Aside from the mission targets and ninjas who stood in his way, he rarely dealt with other ninjas. Compared to escorting supplies, which didn't have much profit, Kakuzu preferred assassination missions. The reason was simple: killing people paid much more than escorting. Sasori's reasoning was even more straightforward. His parents had been killed by Konoha ninjas, so he could never help Konoha, even if it was just escorting supplies. By comparison, participating in the mission to hunt down Mangekyo ninjas was more appealing. At the very least, he could collect materials for making puppets. Byakuya had no objections to their decisions and nodded in agreement. Chapter 177, Konoha's Bounty List. After assigning Hanzo to the task of escorting the supplies, Byakuya left Mangekyo with Kakuzu and Sasori. Both of them were long used to Byakuya's unusual behavior, like giving orders to his teacher. Byakuya had always been eccentric, but he consistently led them in the right direction. Most importantly, although Byakuya called Hanzo teacher, the relationship between the two wasn't necessarily that of a master and disciple. Looking at the current situation in Mangekyo, Hanzo no longer held the title of leader or wielded any power. The only thing left was his reputation as the demigod. As for how the once mighty demigod had become a retired elder in Akatsuki, that was something only Byakuya could explain. After all, Byakuya was the true ruler behind both Akatsuki and Mangekyo, and nearly everything he predicted had come true. After half a day of travel, the 3 of them left the borders of the Land of Rain. Once they were out of the dark and damp environment, Sasori's mood improved noticeably. The climate of the Land of Rain was terrible for puppet making and maintenance. He much preferred the dry environment of the desert. Byakuya took 3 Konoha headbands and Akatsuki uniforms from his backpack and handed them to the other 2. Kakuzu and Sasori took the headbands and cloaks with puzzled expressions. Weren't they Akatsuki ninjas? Shouldn't they wear the Mangekyo headbands if anything? Why would they wear Konoha headbands while donning the Akatsuki cloak? With a serious expression, Byakuya explained, "We are mercenaries hired by Konoha, so of course, we need to wear Konoha headbands. This is called professionalism. Once we've built a reputation, more people will come to us for jobs. Kakuzu thought for a moment, then silently chose to put on the Akatsuki cloak and Konoha headband. Sasori, however, refused to take the Konoha headband, holding firm to his principles. Seeing this, Byakuya didn't force the issue. After putting on his own headband, he opened the bounty list that Konoha had sent. The list was filled with the names of Kumogakure Jonin. At the top of the list was the 4th Rakage, High, with a bounty of 200 million ryo, equivalent to more than 30 asumas. Next was Killer B, the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, with a bounty of 150 million ryo. Upon seeing the list, Kakuzu immediately became interested, his eyes lighting up at the prospect of earning money. After reading the names of the 4th Rakage and Killer B, he said excitedly, "Byakuya, how about we take on the task of assassinating the 4th Rakage? With our combined strength, it's not impossible to succeed. If we do, our reputation will surely spread across the ninja world." Byakuya glanced at Kakuzu and said, "Kakuzu, I'll allow you to act on your own for this mission. But when you get cornered by the 4th Rakage and Killer B, please don't mention my name." Realizing Byakuya wasn't in favor of his plan, Kakuzu's confidence deflated a bit. He had always been an arrogant ninja. Though he failed in his attempt to assassinate the first Hokage, he considered the first Hokage an exception, a monster far beyond the norm. The rest of the ninja world, in his eyes, didn't have such anomalies. But after joining Akatsuki, Kakuzu realized how wrong he had been, terribly wrong. Within Akatsuki alone, there were 5 or 6 ninjas on par with him, and even with such strength, Akatsuki still hadn't yet risen to the level of the 5 great ninja villages. Sasori, sensing Kakuzu's thoughts, had nothing to add. As the grandson of Chiyo, an elder of Sunagakure, Sasori knew all too well the true strength of the village. Frankly speaking, Akatsuki was already powerful enough to crush Sunagakure. But Byakuya's ambitions couldn't be satisfied by taking over a single village. Byakuya wanted to control the entire ninja world. After some discussion, Byakuya chose their first target, a Kumogakure Jonin responsible for escorting supplies. His strength would provide a decent warm-up for the group. Once they had locked onto their target, the 3 of them crossed through the land of fields and arrived in the land of hot water. On their first day in the land of hot water, Byakuya led the group to one of the most famous tourist spots in the land of hot water, settling into a luxurious hot spring hotel. Relaxing in the outdoor bath, Byakuya seemed perfectly at ease, while Sasori, having temporarily set aside his puppet Hirako, crouched in the water blowing bubbles, perplexed by Byakuya's reluctance to take the initiative. Kakuzu, similarly, couldn't understand why they were wasting time here. Noticing their confusion, Byakuya gave them both a disdainful look. They had come all the way to the land of hot water, how could they not enjoy the hot springs? Besides, rather than actively hunting for their targets, it was far more efficient to let their enemies come to them. Just as Byakuya predicted, the moment they walked openly into the land of hot water, sporting their Konoha headbands, the Kumogakure ninjas swarmed toward them like flies attracted to honey. When a group of Kumo ninjas stormed the hot spring hotel with weapons drawn, they found themselves ambushed by Sasori's puppet army, which had been waiting for them. The well-crafted puppets made short work of the Cloud ninjas, who stood no chance. At that moment, a Kumogakure Jonin appeared outside the hot spring hotel. With a loud battle cry, the Jonin swiftly used the body flicker technique to reach the open-air bath. He grinned as he saw Byakuya and the others lounging lazily in the hot spring. These Konoha ninjas were undoubtedly strong, but they were surrounded by water. As long as he used his lightning release, the electric current would paralyze them all. Then, using his superior physical strength, he'd easily take them down. With this plan in mind, the Kumo Jonin formed hand seals and shouted, "Lightning release, lightning fong." In an instant, crackling lightning fangs formed in his hands, and he hurled them viciously toward the hot spring. Seeing this, Kakuzu, who had been resting with his eyes closed, immediately leaped up and countered with his own lightning release. The 2 lightning techniques collided, exploding into sparks that caused the water in the hot spring to sizzle and pop. In the next moment, the Kumo Jonin was struck by a black rod and fell into the hot spring. As his strength ebbed away, the Jonin looked toward Byakuya, disbelief in his eyes. Byakuya was walking calmly through the electrified water without showing any signs of discomfort. To have a body that could withstand this level of power, such strength was extremely rare, even within Kumogakure. Only a handful of people in the entire village possessed such physical resilience. What shocked him even more was the thought that Konoha, while not lacking in powerful shinobi, had never mentioned someone of this caliber in their intelligence. Could it be that Konoha had been hiding elites, or perhaps other ninja villages had intervened? As these thoughts swirled in his mind, the Jonin began to consider fleeing. However, he was suddenly impaled by the tail of Sasori's puppet, Hirako, immobilizing him completely. As he slipped into unconsciousness, he heard one last sentence. "Sasori, didn't I tell you to leave him alive? Without this lead, it will be much harder to track down the other ninjas." Chapter 178, The Next Target. After hearing Byakuya's reprimand, Sasori, with a deadpan expression, retorted, "I held back as much as I could. Who would have thought that this ninja, who launched an attack against the three of us, would be so weak? I expected him to be at least as strong as Maki," Sasori continued. Faced with Sasori's deflection, Byakuya sighed in frustration. He stepped out of the hot spring and began healing the injured Kumogakure Jonin. Under the effects of Byakuya's medical ninjutsu, the Jonin gradually regained consciousness. Fearfully, he stared at Byakuya and stammered, "Who are you people? Konoha shouldn't have shinobi like you. Why are you here?" "We're technically Konoha ninjas for now, considering we're still wearing Konoha headbands." "See?" Byakuya replied casually, pointing at his headband. After a brief pause, Byakuya added, "As for why we're here, we're just on vacation. We came to the land of hot water for some relaxation." "What's it got to do with Kumogakure?" The Kumogakure Jonin stared at Byakuya, unsure whether he was playing dumb or genuinely oblivious. With the current war between Konoha and Kumogakure and the fact that the land of hot water was now occupied by Kumogakure, a group of shinobi proudly displaying Konoha headbands was bound to attract attention. Seeing the Jonin fall silent, Byakuya lost interest in further conversation. "Sasori, Kakuzu, I'm leaving this guy to you. I need all the information he has in half an hour." Sasori nodded, clearly intrigued to test his new information-extracting puppets. Normally, someone hit by Sasori's puppet Hirako would be hard-pressed to survive, but this Jonin had held on longer than expected. It was partly due to Byakuya's medical ninjutsu, but also thanks to the Jonin's robust physical condition. Kumogakure, known for its emphasis on taijutsu and lightning release, produced elite shinobi whose bodies held great experimental value. Sasori was keen to study him. After watching Sasori leave, Byakuya exited the hot spring and headed into the study. The hot spring hotel they were staying in was actually one of his own businesses. However, due to Kumogakure's invasion, normal operations had been disrupted. For now, it would serve as a base for luring in more enemies. Byakuya was confident that more Kumogakure ninjas would target the hotel. As long as the attackers weren't high-caliber threats like the 4th Rakage or the 8-Tails Jinchuriki, any other Kumogakure ninja would meet their doom. This confidence stemmed from Byakuya's and his team's strength. Between him, Kakuzu, and Sasori, they were powerful enough to influence the outcome of localized battles. Unless the 5 Kage or a large number of elite shinobi were dispatched, even if they couldn't win outright, they could easily escape. However, excessively weakening Kumogakure didn't align with Mangekyo's interests. Byakuya needed to find a way to balance the scales, weakening both Kumogakure and Konoha simultaneously. As Byakuya pondered how to undermine Konoha further, a noise came from beneath the floor. Zetsu's head emerged from the ground. The white half of Zetsu, known as Shiro, looked around before addressing Byakuya. "Lord Byakuya, here's the intel you requested. I went through a lot of trouble to get this, so you'll need to pay extra." Byakuya sighed in exasperation at Zetsu's demand for more money but tossed over some bills anyway. He found it absurd that Zetsu, of all beings, was asking for payment. What could Zetsu possibly do with money? It seemed like he'd been spending too much time with Kakuzu and had picked up his habits. Still, giving money to Zetsu was no different than paying Kakuzu. The money wasn't disappearing, it was merely being relocated. Once either of them died, the funds would return to the organization's coffers, essentially back into Byakuya's own hands. Byakuya picked up the intel Zetsu had delivered. The reports were primarily about the Uchiha clan. Interestingly, Zetsu hadn't found Itachi Uchiha in the Uchiha compound, meaning there was no intel on Itachi. The report mostly detailed Fugaku and Shisui. Shisui needed no further elaboration. He was a target Byakuya intended to recruit, though he had yet to fully mature. As for Fugaku, the Uchiha clan leader and father of both Itachi and Sasuke, Byakuya had his reservations. Fugaku struck him as far too indecisive for someone in such a prominent position within the clan. If Uchiha Fugaku had dared to defy the Hokage's orders during the Nine-Tails incident, perhaps he could have changed the Uchiha clan's fate. Besides that, Byakuya found it hard to understand Fugaku's decision to bring his 4-year-old son to the battlefield to kill. One could argue that Itachi's eventual decision to destroy the clan was influenced half by Fugaku and half by a combination of Danzo, Obito, and Shisui. Regarding Fugaku's intel, it mentioned that the elite Jonin had led his clan members into the land of hot water multiple times, attempting to capture isolated Kumogakure shinobi and destroy their outposts for merit. However, while the ideal is grand, the reality is harsh. Fugaku's missions had more failures than successes. The Uchiha clan was no match for the 4th Rakage, whose speed even surpassed the activation of Genjutsu. After reviewing Fugaku's intel, Byakuya turned to the report on Shisui. In contrast to Fugaku's aggressive pursuit of glory, Shisui was much more cautious. Though he had attacked Kumogakure fewer times, his success rate was significantly higher. Unfortunately, Shisui seemed overly cautious. He hadn't even used his Mangekyo Sharingan. This made Byakuya wonder if Shisui had truly awakened Koto Ematsukami, the ultimate power of his Sharingan. As Byakuya continued reading, he saw that Shisui was currently leading a group to track down the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. At this, a faint smile appeared on Byakuya's lips. He had finally found a way to further weaken Konoha. With this thought, Byakuya left the study and went to find Kakuzu and Sasori, who were in the middle of an interrogation. When Byakuya approached, Kakuzu immediately responded, "Byakuya, it'll take more time to extract the intel. This Kumogakure ninja is more stubborn than we anticipated." Byakuya glanced at the Kumogakure Jonin undergoing interrogation and said, "I will be leading the interrogation to you two for now. During this time, focus on self-preservation and don't venture out unnecessarily. I'll be leaving for a few days. We'll meet at the agreed location when I return." Sasori looked puzzled and asked, "Byakuya, where are you going?" With a mysterious smile, Byakuya replied, "I'm going to recruit a new member. We still don't have enough people in the organization. If you two come across any suitable candidates, remember to recruit them for the organization." Byakuya was off to recruit yet another member. Kakuzu and Sasori both fell silent, each wondering who Byakuya intended to bring in next. Nevertheless, Byakuya's departure was good news for them. It meant they had more freedom to act. After giving a few more instructions to Kakuzu and Sasori, Byakuya wasted no time. He used the body flicker technique and disappeared from the spot. Chapter 179, The Trail of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. Within the Land of Fire, Shisui led his team through the forest at high speed, not to pursue enemies but to flee from their pursuers. Dodging a fireball that brushed past him, Shisui's expression turned grim. Half an hour earlier, while carrying out their mission to track the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Shisui's team had finally found traces of their target. Just as Shisui was about to report the information to the main force, Uchiha Yakumo launched an attack, forcing Shisui and Tekka to join the assault on the Two-Tails. After a few rounds of battle, the Two-Tails Jinchuriki fell under the influence of Shisui's Sharingan Jinjutsu and appeared to be in a deep sleep. However, the Jinchuriki had been faking the effects of the Jinjutsu. As they approached, she coordinated with the other Kumo ninjas and launched a counterattack. If Shisui hadn't managed to control one of the Kumo Jonin at a critical moment, the three of them would not have escaped unharmed. Even so, Shisui's team suffered heavy losses. Not only had they lost their ninja cat used for communication, but both Tekka and Yakumo had sustained severe injuries. Without timely aid, they would die from excessive blood loss within hours. Reflecting on the situation, Shisui sighed inwardly, regretting that he hadn't stopped his teammates from attacking the Two Tails earlier and blaming himself for his lack of strength. If he had been stronger, he could have seen through the trap set by the Jinchuriki. Moreover, the intel from the village had definitely been flawed. The Two Tails Jinchuriki was far from an ordinary Jinchuriki. Most would lose their sanity after entering a tailed beast transformation. Yet Yujito Ni, despite her blank eyes, was clearly maintaining her composure. In other words, Yujito was a perfect Jinchuriki, just like the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. There was no time for further contemplation. As Shisui took a sharp turn, a blonde girl appeared in front of him, wearing a mocking smile like a cat toying with a mouse. The blonde girl, dressed in a Kumogakure uniform, was enveloped in the blue, cat-like chakra of the tailed beast. Two faintly visible tails swayed behind her. This girl was none other than Yujito Ni, the Two Tails Jinchuriki, who had been chasing Shisui for some time. Seeing Yujito block his path, Shisui quickly formed hand signs, and over a dozen shadow clones appeared, rushing toward Yujito. Instead of evading, Yujito charged directly at the clones. The violent-tailed beast chakra shredded them apart, but Shisui reappeared behind her, swinging his short sword toward her arms. However, the chakra-infused strike only managed to tear through the bandages on her arms, leaving a shallow cut. Witnessing this, Shisui's expression grew tense. He quickly widened the distance, keeping a close eye on Yujito. In terms of pure ninja and taijutsu abilities, he could easily overpower someone like Yujito, who was close in age. But in her tailed beast transformation mode, Yujito surpassed him in both speed and strength. The most troublesome factor was the immense defense and regenerative power granted by the tailed beast chakra. Moreover, the surge of the tailed beast chakra prevented him from bypassing the chakra cloak's defense to directly control Yujito's senses. With all these disadvantages stacked against him, Shisui realized he was no match for Yujito. Even if Tekka and Yakumo joined the fight, the gap between them as Jonin and a Jinchuriki was insurmountable. Luckily, it seemed that the tailed beast chakra was affecting Yujito's behavior, gradually making her act more like a feline. Clearly possessing the strength to wipe them all out, Yujito had instead chosen to toy with them slowly, giving them a chance to escape or to fight to the bitter end. With this realization, Shisui quickly formed hand signs, inhaled deeply, and shouted, "Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu!" As soon as he spoke, Shisui spewed a massive fireball from his mouth. The blazing sphere shot across the field, heading straight for Yujito. Once again, Yujito didn't bother to dodge, taking the full force of the Great Fireball Jutsu head-on. Taking advantage of this moment, Shisui immediately followed up with Water-style, Water Dragon Jutsu. The combination of the fireball and the Water Dragon created thick, scorching steam that engulfed the surrounding forest. Using the cover of the steam, Shisui randomly chose a direction and darted into the woods. He had bought his teammates enough time. From here on, the only option was for them to scatter and escape separately, increasing their chances of survival. Yujito emerged from the steam and glanced toward the direction where the Uchiha had disappeared. She licked her hand, relishing the hunt. She loved playing cat and mouse, especially when it involved hunting down young prodigies. If she could capture these young Uchiha and bring them back to her village, she would certainly be rewarded by the fourth Rakage. She'd never have to stay on that lifeless turtle island again, a place so dull that she rarely saw another living soul. It was absolutely mind-numbing. Bringing her thoughts back to the present, Yujito looked behind her and frowned. The group of Umbu tasked with protecting her still hadn't caught up. She wasn't even moving at full speed, yet they were still lagging far behind. Were they really supposed to be protecting her? It felt more like she was the one protecting them. Snorting in contempt, Yujito didn't wait for reinforcements. She picked a random direction and pursued her targets. She didn't care if this was a trap set by Konoha. Either way, she was confident she wouldn't get caught. While her speed might not match the Rakage's explosive bursts, her endurance was on a different level. However, what Yujito failed to realize was that the Umbu hadn't fallen behind due to a lack of speed. They had likely encountered another situation. Once Yujito's figure disappeared into the distance, Byakuya cancelled his mayfly technique and emerged from underground. A few minutes earlier, he had sensed the flare of chakra in this area and followed the trail of the tailed beast's chakra, arriving just in time to witness Shisui and his team's defeat. He hadn't expected that even with 3 Uchiha Jonin working together, they couldn't overcome the Cloud Umbu and Yujito, the Two Tails Jinchuriki. This made him question the actual combat strength of the Uchiha. But after thinking about it more, it made sense. The 3-Tomo Sharingan wasn't as powerful as people imagined. To truly unleash the Sharingan's potential, it depended on the user's talent and whether they had mastered secret techniques like Izanagi or Izanami. Moreover, age played a role. Shisui and the others were still too young, far from reaching their peak. As for comparing them to a 3-Tomo Sasuke, that wasn't a fair comparison either. Sasuke's power came from the synergy between the Cursed Seal and the Sharingan. Bringing his drifting thoughts back in line, Byakuya began pursuing Yujito. This encounter should serve as a trigger for Shisui to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Once Shisui gained the Mangekyo, he would finally see the reality of the ninja world and of Konoha. Chapter 180, Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan. After fleeing for over 10 kilometers, Shisui finally found a moment to rest. An hour of high-intensity combat had drained him of nearly all his stamina and chakra. If he pushed himself any further, he risked passing out before even reaching the Konoha camp. He ate a few soldier pills, took a sip of water to regain some strength, and then glanced back in the direction he had come from. Several minutes passed, and he still hadn't heard any signs of pursuit. It seemed that he had successfully escaped from Yujito's chase. Reflecting on the earlier battle, Shisui couldn't help but feel the stark difference in strength between an ordinary Jonin and a Jinchuriki. Had Yujito used the tailed beast bomb earlier, he probably wouldn't have even had the chance to flee. No wonder the Ninetales' attack on the village had caused such massive chaos. However, thoughts of his teammates, Tekka and Yakumo, whose fates were uncertain, left Shisui feeling uneasy. The decision for the 3 of them to scatter and run had been communicated with just a glance. Yet deep down, Shisui knew that he had harbored selfish thoughts. Tekka and Yakumo weren't as fast as he was. During the pursuit by the Kumo ninja, Yujito would surely go after the slower targets, leaving Shisui a better chance to survive. With this realization, Shisui sighed softly, his heart heavy with guilt. He had always claimed to uphold the will of fire, willing to sacrifice his life to protect his comrades. But when it truly came down to a life-or-death situation, he had chosen to run. Even his aspirations to become Hokage and resolve the tensions between the village and the Uchiha clan were the same. He lacked the courage to shoulder that responsibility, instead pushing it onto the clan leader, or even the younger Uchiha, without confronting the problem himself. In this sense, how was he any different from his apathetic clansmen? It was all just empty talk. Leaning against a tree, Shisui pondered for a long time. Then, he glanced again in the direction he had fled from. If he returned now, could he possibly use his life to buy time for his comrades to escape? This thought left him feeling conflicted once more, but eventually, he stood up and began heading back. If he survived today by abandoning his comrades, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Swallowing the remaining soldier pills, Shisui drank a large gulp of water and, while moving swiftly through the forest, began absorbing the energy to replenish his chakra. After several minutes of running at full speed, he followed the lingering chakra traces to a deep canyon. From within the depths of the canyon, sounds of intense battle echoed. A large-scale fight was clearly underway. By sensing the chakra signatures, Shisui could confirm that it was Yakumo battling Yujito, the Two Tails Jinchuriki. Taking a deep breath, he used his body flicker technique to arrive above the canyon. Holding his breath, Shisui looked down into the canyon, and in the next moment, his eyes widened in shock. Yujito had already driven a kunai through Yakumo's chest, her face showing a hint of satisfaction. Yet, There was a trace of disappointment in her expression, as if the battle hadn't been quite as exciting as she had hoped. At that moment, Yujito seemed to sense something. She turned her head and looked toward the top of the canyon. Seeing that Shisui had returned, Yujito smiled and mockingly said, "Shisui Uchiha, I wasn't planning to come after you, but you've returned of your own accord. Are you that eager to die?" Before her words even finished, Yujito used the body flicker technique, appearing right in front of Shisui and walking toward him step by step. Shisui glanced at his comrade's lifeless body, then back at Yujito in the distance. His face shifted between various emotions, and his heart was overwhelmed with turmoil. If he hadn't fled earlier, would Yakumo still be alive? If he had successfully persuaded the clan leader, the mission to capture the Two Tails Jinchuriki would never have happened. Or, if he had been a bit more decisive and established an unquestionable presence, Yakumo wouldn't have taken matters into his own hands, and one life could have been saved. Countless past scenes flashed before Shisui's eyes, causing a sharp pain in his head. Then, a few drops of blood tears streamed from his eyes. When he opened them again, the spinning three-tomo Sharingan was revealed, ultimately solidifying into the shape of a shuriken. Yujito didn't understand what was happening, but Shisui's unusual state made her feel uneasy. Taking a deep breath, she resumed her disdainful expression. Even if Shisui had hidden some of his power, he could not be her opponent. There was an insurmountable chasm between a Jinchuriki and an ordinary ninja. This Uchiha before her was no different, he could never hope to reach the level of a Jinchuriki. However, unlike the previous weakling, Uchiha Shisui still held some value as a captive. Should she take him directly, or remove the Sharingan first before taking him away? As she contemplated how to deal with Shisui, she stepped closer to him. Just as Yujito extended her right hand, preparing to pluck Shisui's eyes out, he suddenly lifted his head. The shuriken-shaped Sharingan sparked her alertness. In the next moment, a chakra skeletal structure projected around Shisui, and the Susanoo formed in an instant. Shisui wasn't entirely aware of what had happened to his eyes, but instinct compelled him to attack Yujito. The Susanoo's arm extended, and it punched Yujito squarely. Hit by such a heavy blow, Yujito was sent flying over 10 meters, crashing into the ground. As she got back to her feet, Yujito looked at Shisui, and instead of fear, excitement lit up her expression. The stronger Shisui was the greater the value of this prize. And that peculiar-looking Sharingan of his, could it be the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan? If it truly was, it could resolve a significant threat to the village. At that moment, Shisui fixed his gaze on Yujito and activated his Sharingan Jinjutsu. Locked onto by the Mangekyo Sharingan, a chill ran down Yujito's spine as she lost control of her body and found herself in a mysterious space. "I've been caught in a Jinjutsu?" Yujito's face grew serious. Ever since she became a Jinchuriki, she had never been controlled by Jinjutsu. The two-tails cat within Yujito noticed her expression and said calmly, "Yujito, you're indeed trapped in a Jinjutsu, but I'm here, so you don't need to worry. I'll break the Jinjutsu for you." With that, a wave of deep blue chakra surged in, shattering the Jinjutsu space like a mirror. Upon escaping the illusion, Yujito looked at Shisui, now protected by the Susanoo, and her demeanor shifted. No longer did she see him as a mere obstacle, he was a true enemy. At this moment, Shisui also realized something was different. Seeing the shuriken-shaped Sharingan reflecting off the sword blades, a bitter smile crept onto his face. His long-desired Mangekyo Sharingan had awakened, but the comrades he wanted to protect were already in peril. It was a cruel irony. Suppressing the complicated thoughts in his heart, Shisui turned his gaze to Yujito and commanded the Susanoo to launch an attack. Chapter 181, Arrival of the Tree World. Quickly rising from the ground, Yujito looked warily at the imposing figure of Susanoo. Although she didn't know exactly what technique Shisui was using, her instincts told her that this green, demon-like entity was connected to the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. She sensed that this technique had the power to rival a tailed beast. With this realization, Yujito began drawing a large amount of chakra from the two tails within her. What had originally been a thin cloak of tailed beast chakra now enveloped her entirely, transforming her into the full-tailed beast form, a massive, blue-flame two-tailed cat. In her beast form, Yujito flashed out of sight, circling Susanoo as she launched blue fireballs from her two fan-like tails. Wherever the fireballs hit, even solid rock was left with gaping holes. Yet, when they struck Susanoo, they caused little damage. Seeing that her fire release attacks were ineffective, Yujito swiftly moved behind Susanoo, slashing her claws down towards its head, leaving 3 deep claw marks. After jumping back to create distance, Yujito relaxed slightly and remarked, "Seems like the Mangekyo Sharingan isn't that impressive after all. The so-called Shinobi World's Demon is just an overrated name." Despite this harsh critique of Madara Uchiha, Shisui's expression didn't change much. Awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan had granted him Susanoo, giving him the strength to fight a Jinchuriki head-on. But maintaining Susanoo consumed an enormous amount of chakra. With the chakra he had left, he could only keep it up for another 3 minutes before his strength and chakra would be completely exhausted. If he couldn't defeat Yujito within these 3 minutes, not only would he fail to avenge Yakumo, but he might also lose his own life. Fortunately, along with the Mangekyo, he had also awakened the powerful illusion technique known as Kodo Amatsukami. This Jinjutsu was much stronger than ordinary ones, capable of altering an enemy's will. However, it had a long cooldown after each use, meaning Shisui had only one chance. If he failed, he would have to flee. With the intent to control Yujito using Kodo Amatsukami, Shisui pushed Susanoo to its limits. It expanded and entered its third form, gaining flesh, armor, and a spiraling longsword in hand. The surge of chakra startled Yujito, but she quickly saw through Shisui's facade, recognizing his waning strength. She lunged at Susanoo again, tearing through it with her claws. The once impenetrable Susanoo shattered like glass, and Shisui, now exposed, plummeted helplessly towards the ground. Yujito caught him in one hand, a mocking smile on her face. However, just then, their eyes met once more before Shisui unleashed Kodo Amatsukami. A single tear of blood slid from his eye as Yujito's expression turned blank, her tailed beast form dissolving at an alarming rate. Freed from Yujito's grasp, Shisui looked at her, now under his control, and began to ponder her fate. Rationally, it made sense to spare her. Taking Yujito back to the village would grant Konoha leverage in negotiations, and the Uchiha clan would receive significant credit. This might even improve relations between the Uchiha and the village. Emotionally, however, he still felt the urge to kill her for having killed Yakumo. Letting her live seemed like a betrayal of his fallen comrade. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind before Shisui looked towards the depths of the canyon. Yakumo, though severely injured, might not be dead yet. Perhaps there was still time to save him. Just as Shisui moved towards the canyon, he sensed an overwhelming chakra locking onto him. Turning around, he saw that Yujito had somehow broken free from Kodo Amatsukami's control and had re-entered her tailed beast form. This should have been impossible. The technique should have kept her under control. A grim realization dawned on Shisui. He had successfully controlled Yujito, but not the two tails within her. Without the Jinchuriki to restrain it, the beast had broken free. Now, the two tails chakra was spilling out of Yujito, forming its full physical body once more. With horror, Shisui saw the two tails preparing to unleash a tailed beast bomb. Powerless, he had no chakra left to summon Susanoo again. As the seconds passed, the once ping-pong-sized bomb swelled to the size of a millstone. If it detonated, the entire canyon would collapse. At that critical moment, a figure appeared beside Shisui, patting him on the shoulder. "It's been a while, Shisui. Looks like you've awakened some impressive eyes, the Mangekyo Sharingan, right?" Shisui spun around, startled before he saw Byakuya, dressed in the distinctive Akatsuki cloak and wearing a Konoha forehead protector. His expression was peculiar. Why was Byakuya here? And why was he wearing a Konoha forehead protector? Questions swirled in Shisui's mind, but there wasn't time to think them through. Pointing to the rampaging two tails, Shisui shouted, "Byakuya, now's not the time for this. The Jinchuriki is out of control." Byakuya nodded calmly. I see it. It's about to fire a tailed beast bomb, but that doesn't stop us from catching up, right? It's just a disobedient little cat. Hearing this, Shisui broke out in cold sweat. Since when had a tailed beast, a force capable of destroying villages and ruling battlefields, been reduced to the status of a mere cat? Byakuya, this is no time for jokes. If we don't work together, we'll die here. If you're that scared of this little cat, then let me make it behave for a while so it doesn't interrupt us. With that, Byakuya strode towards the two tails. As he approached the massive, mountain-like beast, he squinted slightly, calculating how best to handle it. This was his first time facing off against a tailed beast. He had fought powerful humans like Hanzo and Sasori, but they were nothing like the chakra-formed tailed beasts. These creatures couldn't be killed easily unless one wielded would release the Sharingan or advanced sealing techniques. Conveniently, Byakuya had mastered all three. His only dilemma now was deciding which technique to display in front of Shisui. After a brief moment of contemplation, Byakuya clasped his hands together and slammed them to the ground. Wood Style, Advent of a World of Flowering Trees. Chapter 182, The Defeat of the Two Tails. Wood Style, Advent of a World of Flowering Trees. As Byakuya's low voice echoed, the once calm earth split in two. Countless massive vines erupted from the ground, snaking towards the two tails like enormous pythons. At that moment, the tailed beast's bomb, fully formed, exploded in the heart of the canyon. The brilliant light, as radiant as the sun, instantly melted the vines entangling the two tails. The massive shockwave tore through the canyon, uprooting trees, blasting dust into the air, and sweeping debris towards both ends of the ravine. Even someone as strong as Shisui could only retreat in the face of such a massive explosion. However, as the dust settled, more vines emerged from the earth, engulfing the struggling two tails once again, draining its chakra. Sensing the beast's location, Byakuya instantly appeared atop its head. Clasping his hands together, he summoned black chakra rods and plunged them into the two tails' body. The violent beast's ferocious gaze slowly softened under the intense stimuli, its wildness giving way to clarity. Fear spread across its face as it recognized Byakuya sitting atop its head, surrounded by massive vines. Old, buried memories resurfaced in its mind. As a tailed beast, the two tails could never forget the battle decades ago. A young shinobi clad in red armor had stormed its territory, muttering about how dangerous the tailed beasts were, and had sealed it away using wood-release techniques. That man was the first Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. Though the boy before it now wasn't the same person from decades ago, he wielded the same wood-release, a power that, while not overwhelming, was terrifyingly formidable. Could history be repeating itself, with the shinobi world once again facing the same fate as before? Who exactly are you, boy? Why do you possess wood-release? The two tails asked, but it no longer had time to demand answers. Having spent so much of its chakra, it had no choice but to retreat into Ujito-ni's body. Byakuya glanced at the two tails and smirked, pointing at the forehead protector he wore. As soon as the two tails saw the Konoha insignia, it understood. So, this boy was a leaf shinobi, which explained his mastery of the first Hokage's wood-release. The leaf had distributed the tailed beasts like playthings years ago, surely they wouldn't bother capturing it again. Ujito-ni, however, had been deceived. If Mangekyo had known that the leaf possessed such a powerful shinobi, they would never have attacked. This mistake was going to cost them dearly. Byakuya quickly performed the four-symbol seal, reinforcing the seal on Ujito's body. Carrying the unconscious Ujito on his shoulder, Byakuya walked over to Shisui, chuckling as he said, "The annoying little cat has been dealt with. Now, no one will disturb our reunion." Shisui, who had witnessed the entire battle, felt a whirlwind of emotions. There were so many questions he wanted to ask Byakuya, but his mind was in disarray. He needed a moment to gather his thoughts. After a brief silence, Shisui finally spoke. "Byakuya, I owe you for your help, but why are you here? And why are you wearing a Leaf Village forehead protector?" Byakuya casually replied, "Jeriah hired us to deal with Mangekyo. As for why I'm here, let's just say it's fate that brought the two of us together. I've been tracking down the two-tails Jinchuriki myself. Byakuya's explanation only deepened Shisui's confusion. Shisui asked, why would Lord Jeriah hire ninja from Mangekyo? And Byakuya, didn't you always hate Konoha, constantly calling it hypocritical and dangerous? How did you end up willingly working as a mercenary for them? Byakuya noticed Shisui's doubts but didn't rush to explain, patiently waiting for him to ask further. After wrestling with his thoughts, Shisui took a deep breath and cautiously asked, Byakuya, how did you come to possess the first Hokage's would release? He stared intently at Byakuya, eager for a concrete answer. Would release, like many Kekkai Genkai, bloodline limits, wasn't unique in its existence. However, for Konoha, it carried a much deeper significance. It was the unique bloodline ability of the first Hokage, and only he had ever wielded it. Now, seeing someone outside the leaf with such a power, especially someone like Byakuya who seemed to harbor negative feelings toward the village, raised serious concerns in Shisui's mind. What could this mean? If it had been someone else, like clan leader Fugaku or elder Setsuna from years ago, they might have already used their Sharingan to cast a Jinjutsu on Byakuya, forcing out the answers they wanted. Byakuya, noticing Shisui's confusion, gave a puzzled expression before nonchalantly saying, I don't really know why I have would release. But the Senju and Uzumaki clans have intermarried for centuries, so maybe I have some Senju blood in me. Pausing for a moment, he added, but that's not really important. Would release isn't as powerful as you think. I almost messed up while fighting the two-tails just now. Shisui couldn't help but secretly retort in his mind, it didn't look like you were struggling at all. Internally, Shisui became even more curious about Byakuya's background. He wielded Uzumaki techniques, had the first Hokage's would release, and yet maintained a cold attitude toward Konoha. The mix of abilities and contradictions surrounding Byakuya was overwhelming. Realizing he wouldn't get a bold, direct answer from Byakuya, Shisui decided to shift the conversation. He glanced at the unconscious Yujito and asked, Byakuya, what do you plan to do with the two-tails Jinchuriki? I'm not sure yet. Byakuya looked over at Shisui before adding, but you still haven't answered my question. Do you have the Mangekyo Sharingan? Shisui hesitated for a moment, seemingly unsure whether to tell the truth. After a brief pause, he nodded. Yes, my eyes are the Mangekyo Sharingan. But after gaining them, I didn't feel as happy as I thought I would. That's only natural. The Sharingan evolves through extreme emotions, and those emotions often come from tragedy, Byakuya remarked casually. So, did you awaken your Mangekyo by seeing through Konoha, through the Uchiha, or through yourself? Though Byakuya's tone was light, his words struck deep in Shisui. Once again, Byakuya had seen through his inner thoughts. The fact that Byakuya knew the secrets behind the Sharingan's evolution and understood the tensions between the Uchiha and the village deeply unsettled Shisui. Could Byakuya also know about his Mangekyo technique, Kodo Ematsukumi? While Shisui was wrestling with his worries, Byakuya didn't press further. Instead, he used the body flicker technique to move among the rubble in the canyon and found the injured Yakumo. Byakuya felt Yakumo's body and frowned. Shisui, this person is from your clan, right? Judging by his injuries, he won't be able to become a ninja again. Won't be able to become a ninja again? Shisui reacted quickly and asked urgently, Byakuya, do you mean he'll still be able to survive? Byakuya nodded and said, of course, he can live. These aren't fatal injuries. Chapter 183, I still want to give it a try. Before Shisui could speak, Byakuya took the initiative to pull out a blood bag and poured it directly into Yakumo's mouth, simultaneously starting to perform medical ninjutsu. Under the effects of the medical ninjutsu and the Uzumaki blood, the previously barely breathing Yakumo's face regained some color. After realigning his internal organs, the ones that had been pierced by a kunai began to rapidly heal. Soon, only a frightening-looking hole remained, but the life-threatening danger was gone. Seeing Byakuya's extraordinary medical skills, Shisui was momentarily stunned. He was well aware of the severity of Yakumo's injuries. Even if they called upon Lady Tsunade, the Slug Princess, the chances of saving him would have been less than 30%. Yet, Byakuya had managed to rescue him with just a bag of blood and his medical ninjutsu. Noticing Shisui's strange gaze, Byakuya let out a small snort. Jealous? This is the power of the Uzumaki bloodline. It's because of this ability that Uzumaki, isolated overseas, was destroyed by an alliance of enemies. Hearing this, Shisui fell silent. He didn't know much about Uzumaki's history, but he was aware that Uzumaki and Konoha had been allies, to the point that even Konoha's forehead protector design was modeled after the Uzumaki clan's crest. However, as time passed, the Uzumaki clan had gradually faded into a mere name. This made him start to worry about his own clan's fate. Due to various reasons, the Uchiha clan had faced ostracism from both the village and the Hokage's office. Would they one day face a crisis similar to the Uzumaki clans? As this thought crossed his mind, Shisui suddenly understood why Byakuya harbored such deep hostility toward the village. It wasn't because Byakuya had some prophetic ability, nor because his intelligence analysis was exceptionally sharp. It was because the Uzumaki clan, to which Byakuya belonged, had already experienced everything he feared. After finishing the treatment, Byakuya tossed Yakumo over to Shisui's side. Feeling the warmth and breathing of his comrade, Shisui let out a sigh of relief and then looked over to Yujito, waiting for Byakuya to deal with the Jinchuriki. Seeming to understand Shisui's thoughts, Byakuya chuckled and said, "Shisui, are you interested in the Two-Tails Jinchuriki? If you offer a suitable price, I wouldn't mind letting you take the credit." "Are you asking me to take the credit? Isn't Mangekyo interested in the achievement of defeating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki?" Byakuya shook his head lightly. "Achievements can't be eaten as food. With that old man Hanzo and Mangekyo, we don't need additional deterrents. It's better to let Uchiha take the credit." Considering Byakuya's offer for a moment, Shisui then asked, "What does Uchiha need to give in order to buy the Two-Tails Jinchuriki from you?" Byakuya looked at the Two-Tails Jinchuriki and replied, "It's simple. Uchiha gets the credit for defeating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, and we and Mangekyo get the Two-Tails. Both sides get what they need." Hearing this, Shisui's expression became more serious. It was clear that Byakuya had come for the Two-Tails. If Mangekyo were to obtain a tailed beast, their already powerful village would firmly step into the ranks of the 5 great ninja villages, becoming the 6th great village. After thinking for a moment, Shisui said, "If you really take away the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Mangekyo won't let it slide. They'll definitely come after Mangekyo." Byakuya nodded and chuckled. If the Two-Tails Jinchuriki were still alive, then Mangekyo would certainly cause trouble. But if the Jinchuriki is already dead? Would Mangekyo really avenge a dead person? Upon hearing this, Shisui's previously narrowed gazes eased up a bit. At present, the Two-Tails Jinchuriki had fallen into their hands, and as long as Shisui and Byakuya reached an agreement, the fate of the Two-Tails, whether to live or die, was up to them. Though a living Two-Tails Jinchuriki could bring greater benefits to the village, Shisui couldn't afford to turn against Byakuya at this moment. It would be more advantageous to claim the fame of defeating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki and gain Byakuya's favor. After all, Byakuya was the one truly capable of defeating a Jinchuriki, and he had just saved both his and Yakumo's lives. He was their benefactor. After making up his mind, Shisui nodded and said, "Since Lord Byakuya has spoken, I can only follow your decision." After a brief division of interests, Byakuya made a hand seal and performed the wood clone jutsu. Even though Shisui had seen Byakuya use wood release before, he was still a little surprised when he saw the wood clone. Byakuya noticed Shisui's reaction but didn't say much. This was precisely the effect he wanted. As long as he casually revealed some superficial abilities in front of Shisui would inevitably start overthinking them in his mind. After sending the wood clone off with the Two-Tails Jinchuriki to a safe location, the two of them carried Yakumo and headed toward the Konoha camp. Shisui went to report on the defeat of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, while Byakuya was headed there to demand his reward from Jeriah. After sprinting through the forest for some time, Byakuya and Shisui suddenly stopped. They noticed a figure standing on a distant tree branch, an Uchiha with 3 Tomo in his Sharingan. It was none other than Tekka Uchiha. When Tekka saw Shisui and Yakumo, he was excited, but upon noticing Byakuya, his expression quickly darkened before he instinctively tightened his grip on his short sword. Tekka hadn't forgotten the humiliation Byakuya had subjected him to more than a year ago. He recognized that seemingly harmless smile on Byakuya's face. Seeing that Tekka was ready to attack, Shisui hurriedly spoke, "Tekka, Byakuya is not our enemy. He's a ninja hired by Lord Jeriah." Upon hearing this, Tekka hesitantly lowered his sword, but there was still a wary look in his eyes. Byakuya instantly appeared behind Tekka, took the short sword from his waist, and after casually twirling it in his hand, he chuckled and said, "Shisui is right. If I were your enemy, I wouldn't have given you the chance to notice me. My Sharingan didn't even react." Tekka's clothes were drenched in sweat as he stared at Byakuya, his eyes filled with nothing but fear. Shisui sighed and said, "Lord Byakuya, please don't take offense. Tekka has always been impulsive. I ask for your understanding. I'm not one to hold grudges. It was just a little joke." "You definitely don't hold grudges, but that's only because your enemies are usually killed on the spot," Shisui inwardly grumbled as he walked toward Tekka. Just then, Byakuya suddenly said to Shisui, "Although it was my idea, the fame of defeating a Jinchuriki is a double-edged sword. You should consider it carefully." Shisui paused and softly replied, "I know it's a double-edged sword, but for the sake of the clan and the village, I still want to give it a try. What if it succeeds?" Hearing this, Byakuya chuckled and said, "Shisui, you make a good point. I look forward to the day you succeed. But the reality of the ninja world is even harsher than you imagine. If you ever find yourself with no other options, feel free to come and join me. I specialize in taking in those without a home." Chapter 184, Meeting Jeriah Again. "What? Shisui, you actually killed the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Yujito ni?" Upon hearing that Shisui and Byakuya had teamed up to kill the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Tekka Uchiha's eyes widened in disbelief. His face was filled with astonishment. He had seen Yujito ni's strength before, which was far beyond what an ordinary jonin could handle. The fact that Shisui had not only fought against but also defeated and killed Yujito ni made him feel like the world had become unreal. Shisui nodded and then said, "To be precise, it was only possible because I teamed up with Lord Byakuya. Without him, I probably would have died along with the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. Stop being so modest, Shisui. You're already the strongest in the clan now." Tekka completely ignored Shisui's explanation. Real accomplishments spoke much louder than words. Shisui did not deny being called the strongest in the clan. Before awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, he might not have been a match for the clan leader, Fugaku, but now that he had the Mangekyo, he was undoubtedly the strongest jonin in the Uchiha clan. Such is the dominance of the Mangekyo Sharingan over the ordinary Sharingan. At that moment, Tekka seemed to remember something. He glanced at both Shisui and Byakuya before asking, "Where is the body of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki?" Shisui and Byakuya exchanged a look, then gave the prepared explanation. After hearing that the body of Yujito ni had been destroyed in the explosion of the tailed beast bomb, Tekka looked disappointed and sighed quietly. A living Jinchuriki was far more valuable than a dead one. Not only was the value of the tailed beast itself significant, but Yujito ni's status as a high-ranking member of Kumogakure could have provided a wealth of intelligence, potentially enabling them to launch a surprise attack on the Kumo's forces. However, since Shisui had defeated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, it wasn't entirely impossible that one day he could also defeat the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee. After learning the details of the battle, Tekka turned his attention to the unconscious Yakumo. What happened to Yakumo? Why is he unconscious? Shisui sighed softly. Yakumo was attacked by Yujito ni. If Lord Byakuya hadn't treated him in time, he would have been in grave danger. Upon learning that Byakuya had saved Yakumo, Tekka's attitude toward Byakuya shifted to one of more respect. First, because Byakuya had saved one of his clan members, which was enough to cancel out any past grudges. Second, Medical ninjas are held in high esteem in the ninja world, especially those who are also capable in combat. Noticing Tekka's expression, Byakuya remarked nonchalantly, "Don't stare at me. You Uchiha won't be dodging the medical expenses. Don't think you can freeload off my supplies." A few hours later, Byakuya's group arrived at the Konoha camp. The nearby Konoha ninja recognized Shisui and the others, but they were suspicious of Byakuya, who clearly wasn't a Konoha ninja based on his attire with flame cloud patterns. Particularly since Byakuya was loudly asking to meet Jeriah. Just as Shisui was about to explain Byakuya's identity, one of the jonin in the group suddenly seemed to recall something and said with a smile, "You must be Byakuya, the jonin from Mangekyo. Lord Jeriah specifically instructed us that if we saw you, we should bring you to the command center." "Oh?" Byakuya looked at the Konoha jonin with interest and laughed. "Is that so? How did you recognize me so quickly? Could it be that my name has already spread across the entire ninja world?" "Indeed, that's the case." The Konoha jonin nodded quickly but couldn't help thinking to himself, that's not what Lord Jeriah said at all. He actually said that Byakuya is the most arrogant brat around and easy to recognize at a glance. Now it seems Jeriah was right. This kid is so cocky that even an Uchiha jonin addresses him as Lord. That's no ordinary level of arrogance. Byakuya had no idea what the Konoha ninja was thinking, but he nodded in satisfaction. Following the jonin's lead, he headed towards the command room. As the door to the command room swung open, Byakuya saw Jeriah deeply immersed in handling military affairs. Compared to 6 months ago, Jeriah's usual easygoing demeanor had faded, replaced with exhaustion. The long months of war had clearly taken a toll on him, both physically and mentally. Jeriah, who had already sensed their arrival, lifted his head to look at the group. Seeing Byakuya standing with Shisui and the other Uchiha, he looked surprised, silently wondering why Byakuya was with them. As if reading Jeriah's thoughts, Byakuya pulled out a bag full of ninja tags and headbands and said, "Jeriah, these are all my spoils of war. You better be prepared to pay up." Jeriah glanced at the headbands, all of which bore the insignia of the hidden cloud, while the ninja tags indicated their ranks and identities. After a closer inspection, Jeriah's eyes widened in shock as he exclaimed, 21 Chunin, 5 Jonin. "Did you really take down this many Kumo ninjas by yourself, Byakuya?" "I'm just doing the job I was paid to do, isn't that what was agreed?" Byakuya frowned slightly. "Jeriah, you're not thinking of shortchanging me, are you? Because if you are, I might just take my talents to Kumogakure." This statement startled the nearby Konoha ninjas, who now eyed Byakuya with heightened caution and suspicion. Jeriah quickly motioned for his subordinates to stay calm and responded, "I promised you get paid, and you will. Every Ryo will be sent to Mangekyo as agreed. You have my word." Only then did Byakuya's expression soften slightly. "Good. I was starting to think Konoha might be unable to afford it. After all, my subordinates have been hunting Kumo ninja as well. I was worried you wouldn't be able to pay for all that." Jeriah thought to himself, "You might be making a killing, but Konoha certainly won't be losing out either." Shifting his focus, Jeriah turned to Shisui and asked, "We've cleared up the payment, but why are you with Shisui and the others?" Byakuya, as if suddenly remembering, chuckled and said, "Oh, right. I also saved these Uchiha when they were fighting the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. If I hadn't intervened, they would have all died along with her. These Uchiha are your people, so you'll have to pay for saving them too." Jeriah blinked, almost unable to believe his ears. "Byakuya, what did you just say?" Byakuya repeated without missing a beat, "You'll have to pay me for saving them." Jeriah shook his head and, his expression becoming more serious, asked, "No, not that. You said earlier that Shisui and the others almost died. Against whom?" "They almost died fighting the Two-Tails Jinchuriki." Once Jeriah was sure he hadn't misheard, he asked, "You mean they almost died, but they managed to defeat Kumogakure's Two-Tails Jinchuriki?" "That's not quite accurate," Byakuya corrected with a pause. "We killed the Two-Tails Jinchuriki." Chapter 185, Jiraiya's suspicion. You've managed to survive an encounter with a Jinchuriki, that's already impressive. But, Jeriah suddenly stopped mid-sentence, realizing something. His eyes widened in shock. Wait, did you just say that you killed the Two-Tails Jinchuriki? Byakuya casually found a place to sit and, without much care, said, with my strength and Shisui's, taking down the Two-Tails Jinchuriki wasn't that hard. Does that sound strange to you? Of course, it sounded strange. A Jinchuriki possessed the terrifying power of a tailed beast within them. Throughout history, except for legendary figures like the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha during the Warring States period, few had ever taken Jinchuriki lightly. They were essentially walking natural disasters due to the immense power of the tailed beast sealed inside them. However, considering Ujito-Ni's, the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, relatively young age and Byakuya and Shisui's abilities, it wasn't completely impossible for them to have defeated her. Shisui was known as Uchiha's top genius, and Byakuya was a monster capable of easily defeating elite jonin. After a brief pause, Jeriah chuckled and said, the reward for defeating a Jinchuriki is immeasurable. I'll need to report this to the Hokage and get his opinion. But don't worry, Byakuya, Konoha will definitely provide the appropriate compensation. Hearing this, Byakuya nodded in satisfaction, muttering softly to himself, didn't expect to get such an extra reward on this trip, not only the payment for rescuing the Uchiha but also the bounty for Ujito-Ni. Though Byakuya's voice was low, Jeriah heard it clearly, and a hint of doubt crossed his mind. Could it be that Ujito-Ni wasn't taken down by Byakuya but rather by Shisui's team? With this thought, Jeriah turned his gaze towards Shisui and asked, Shisui, why don't you tell me the details of this mission? Shisui nodded lightly and, as planned, recounted their prepared story. According to Shisui, their team had stumbled upon Ujito-Ni, who was operating alone. After a grueling battle, they managed to subdue her, but they nearly died in the explosion caused by the tailed beast's bomb. After hearing this, Jeriah's expression became skeptical. He wasn't completely convinced by Shisui's account. After all, Jeriah himself had experience battling Jinchuriki and knew firsthand that they were never so easy to defeat. However, the power of the Sharingan was well known in the ninja world. With the right tactics and an element of surprise, a victory wasn't entirely out of the question. If Shisui really had managed to defeat Ujito-Ni, then the Uchiha clan now had an elite ninja on par with Kage-level strength. At this moment, Byakuya shot an annoyed look at Shisui and said irritably, the Jinchuriki was taken down by Shisui, but if it weren't for my intervention, Shisui would have died along with the Two-Tails. Jeriah, given our relationship, I assume you'll make sure my name is included in the report, right? This remark immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room, who were all astonished at Byakuya's shamelessness. Their understanding of his audacity reached new heights. Jeriah couldn't help but chuckle at this and said, don't worry, I'll make sure to mention you both in my report to the Hokage. But defeating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki is no small matter. I'll need time to adjust our strategic plans. You can leave for now. With that, Byakuya and Shisui didn't linger in the command room and quickly took their leave. After Byakuya and Shisui left, Jeriah put away his smile and turned toward the back room, saying, Shikaku, Choza, what do you think about the credibility of Byakuya and Shisui's claims? Shikaku Nara stepped out of the room, looking at Jeriah and responding, we'll know soon enough whether the Two-Tails Jinchuriki was truly eliminated. There's no need for Byakuya and Shisui to deceive us. Hearing this, Jeriah let out a soft sigh. Shikaku, you know that's not what I'm asking. Shikaku furrowed his brows, a bit puzzled. Then what exactly are you doubting, Jeriah? If they really eliminated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, it's a good thing for the village, and the Uchiha will get the credit they want. That's true, maybe I'm overthinking it. Seeing Shikaku deliberately feigning ignorance, Jeriah decided not to dwell on the details. In Jeriah's opinion, there were several loopholes in Byakuya and Shisui's story, raising suspicions that they might be selling their achievements to the Uchiha. After all, with Shisui's strength, it would be impossible to defeat a Jinchuriki unless he possessed the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. But if Shisui did indeed have the Mangekyo, it would likely lead to chaos within the village once again. Shikaku had guessed these possibilities as well, which was why he was pretending to be oblivious. He wanted to avoid getting embroiled in the conflicts between the Hokage Tower and the Uchiha. The Uchiha taking credit for eliminating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki might not necessarily be a good thing for them either. Returning to the main topic, Jeriah asked Shikaku, "When do you think I should report the news about Ujito-ni to the Hokage? If she has really been eliminated, should we continue to defend or take the opportunity to launch a counterattack?" Shikaku pondered for a moment before saying, "Jeriah, it's likely that Kumogakure hasn't yet received news of Ujito-ni's death. This would be a prime opportunity for us to launch a counterattack." After a brief pause, Shikaku added, "But my suggestion is that we should hold our ground here." "Why?" Jeriah didn't understand Shikaku's plan. The most optimal choice right now would be to expand their victory, yet Shikaku was advising him to maintain their position. Shikaku took a deep breath and explained, "If this were just a single battle, then yes, it would be ideal for us to push into the Land of Lightning and destroy Kumogakure. But the village has enemies besides just Kumogakure. If we advance into the Land of Lightning, Iwagakure and Kirigakure would definitely intervene. Also, while Amagakure is our ally now, that might not be the case in the future." Upon hearing this, Jiraiya's expression became serious as he grasped Shikaku's perspective. If Konoha were to fail in this invasion by Kumogakure, they would lose their ally in the Land of Water and potentially give up land in the northeastern region. However, if Kumogakure faced a total collapse, it was possible that Iwagakure and Kirigakure would secretly ally with Kumogakure to counter Konoha. Amagakure could then gain power in the chaos of war, posing a threat to Konoha's safety. Although Shikaku's words were harsh and risked damaging the relationship between Amagakure and Konoha, Jeriah understood that Shikaku's suspicions had merit. While Amagakure was currently managed by Yahiko and others, the real puppet master remained Hanzo of the Salamander. This figure was renowned in the ninja world and required careful handling. With this in mind, Jeriah sighed softly. The ninja world was filled with deceptions and betrayals. He had to accept that the peaceful world he longed for, where people could understand each other without conflict, might not exist after all. Even this ninja, who so desperately craved peace, was already stained with blood. Chapter 186, Lightning Shadow and Killer Bee. After leaving the command room, Byakuya originally planned to depart from the Konoha camp, but at Shisui's enthusiastic invitation, he went to the Uchiha camp with Shisui. Before reaching the camp, Byakuya saw Fugaku leading a group of Uchiha ninjas to him. Fugaku Uchiha's appearance fits the standard of born evil. His eyes and expression are always cold, as if everyone else owed him a fortune. Before Byakuya could greet him, Fugaku spoke up, "Shisui, this person beside you must be Byakuya, the disciple of the demigod Hanzo, who once captured you and Tekka and the others." Byakuya showed a look of surprise and said, "I didn't expect that a nobody like me would be remembered by the head of the Sharingan clan. I'm truly flattered." Faced with Byakuya's slightly sharp reply, Fugaku pondered for a few seconds. Since the last time Byakuya visited Konoha with Yahiko and the others, Fugaku had conducted an investigation into Byakuya, knowing that he was the one who had kidnapped Shisui and was also a disciple of Hanzo. Shisui's expression was somewhat awkward as he quickly said, "Lord Fugaku, this time it was all thanks to Byakuya. If it weren't for him, I, Tekka, and the others wouldn't have been able to return." "I know." Fugaku looked at Byakuya and smiled, saying, "I was just joking with you, Byakuya. You saved Shisui and Tekka, so you are already a friend of the Uchiha clan." Byakuya smiled back, "Chief Fugaku, you really have a good sense of humor. However, last time was indeed a misunderstanding. I thought you were fighting over prey, and resolving the misunderstanding was all that was needed. However, Hanzo has always been interested in your Uchiha clan. How about visiting Amagakure if you have the opportunity?" Upon hearing this, a glint flashed in Fugaku's eyes. Byakuya's words seemed casual, but they revealed a lot of information. First, Hanzo's interest in the Uchiha clan was both good and bad. Secondly, the invitation to visit was surely more than a simple visit. It suggested that Mangekyo might be looking to recruit the Uchiha. Otherwise, Byakuya, who had previously kidnapped Shisui, wouldn't be so generous toward the Uchiha this time. Of course, to get the real answer, he would have to ask Shisui, as he had spent the most time with Byakuya, both before and now. After finding an excuse to divert Byakuya, Fugaku led Shisui to a corner. Shisui knew Fugaku's intentions and said, "Are you wanting to inquire about the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Lord Fugaku?" Fugaku did not answer directly, staring at Shisui. Under Fugaku's gaze, Shisui slowly spoke, "The Two-Tails Jinchuriki was not solely hunted down by me, it was a joint effort between me and Byakuya. This is a deal between Byakuya and me." Upon hearing this, Fugaku's doubts were considerably eased. He had wondered when Shisui had the strength to die alongside the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, but it turned out they had worked together to defeat it. However, being able to work together to defeat the Two-Tails Jinchuriki showed Shisui's strength. Fugaku had no objections to the deal between Shisui and Byakuya. If it were him, he would also make such a deal with Byakuya, as the Uchiha needed achievements to prove themselves. "You did well this time. I will give Byakuya the money he was promised." After a pause, Fugaku continued, "However, the Hokage office will definitely have suspicions about us. We Uchiha need more achievements to prove ourselves." Shisui nodded and said, "Lord Fugaku, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." At that moment, Fugaku suddenly remembered something and said, "Shisui, there's one more thing I almost forgot to ask you. Have you awakened your Mangekyo Sharingan?" Upon hearing this, Shisui felt a surge of tension, hesitating over whether or not to confess. After pondering for a moment, he decided to conceal the news. "Mangekyo Sharingan? Isn't that just a legend within the clan? Since that incident, there hasn't been a Mangekyo Sharingan in the clan. Is there really none?" Fugaku confirmed again. Shisui shook his head, letting out a soft sigh as he said, "Clan head, I also want to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan, but it's not that simple to activate." Fugaku stared at Shisui for a long time before sighing. "When I heard you and Byakuya teamed up against the Jinchuriki earlier, I thought you had awakened the Mangekyo. If the clan truly had a pair of Mangekyo, the chances of competing for the position of Hokage would increase significantly." Shisui nodded in agreement. "Yeah, if clan head Fugaku awakened a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan, this war could be resolved quickly." Upon hearing this, Fugaku waved his hand, signaling Shisui to leave. Watching Shisui's departing figure, Fugaku's expression became unpredictable. Although he couldn't find evidence of Shisui possessing the Mangekyo Sharingan, his intuition told him that Shisui absolutely had it. Otherwise, Shisui wouldn't have been able to return to rescue Yakumo, nor could he have activated Susanoo. Indeed, after Yakumo woke from his coma, he reported to Fugaku what he had seen before losing consciousness. In a daze, Yakumo had seen the icy green phantom of a divine spirit. That divine spirit could not be any other ninjutsu, it could only be the legendary Susanoo. As for why Shisui was unwilling to mention the Mangekyo Sharingan, it was likely out of concern that the Hokage faction would accuse him of instigating the Nine-Tails incident. However, it was impossible for Shisui's character to do such a thing. Additionally, it related to Shisui's ideology. Like Kagami Uchiha, Shisui was full of fantasies about the Hokage faction, but the position of Hokage could not be granted by the Hokage faction, one must fight for it through strength. Thinking of this, Fugaku let out a soft sigh. Why did every ninja in the clan who awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan fail to understand the family? Madara was like this, and so was Shisui. In the land of waterfalls, the 4th Rakage was scouting the front lines with Killer Bee. Unlike the leaders of other ninja villages who stayed at the Central Army, the 4th Rakage enjoyed personally leading the charge alongside Killer Bee. This action not only boosted morale but also maximized the effectiveness of a Kage-level powerhouse. However, there were downsides. If they encountered a large enemy force's siege, even a Kage-level powerhouse could be overwhelmed by a sea of enemies. Nevertheless, the 4th Rakage was not worried at all, because he was acting alongside Killer Bee, who was the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails. While Killer Bee might not be as skilled in other areas, he excelled at countering sea tactics. At that moment, the fourth Rakage suddenly stopped and looked toward the forest behind him. From the forest emerged a Kumogakure Umbu, who cautiously approached the fourth Rakage and handed over an intelligence scroll. The fourth Rakage took the scroll, his expression shifting between anger and uncertainty. Killer Bee, noticing the fourth Rakage's expression, asked in confusion, "Big brother, what happened?" The fourth Rakage said angrily, "We just received news that a team from the Land of Rain has gone missing." Chapter 187, The Hidden Cloud is no longer Kumogakure of the past. "Oh, my big brother, the Jinchuriki has disappeared." Upon hearing this, Killer Bee started rapping to himself. He didn't care about the news of the Jinchuriki's disappearance. Like him, the Jinchuriki had also been a perfect vessel who entered the Fountain of Truth. Although his combat strength was not on par with himself and Brother A, he was still among the top in the village. In Killer Bee's eyes, the Jinchuriki must have slipped away from his guards and gone out to hunt Konoha ninjas. He understood this well. It was truly unbearable to feel like one was always being watched. Seeing that Killer Bee still didn't understand the seriousness of the situation, the fourth Rakage said sternly, "Killer Bee, it's not just the Jinchuriki that's missing, since even the Umbu assigned to protect him have lost contact." Killer Bee's expression changed slightly as he instantly grasped the gravity of the situation. The Jinchuriki might act recklessly, but the Umbu certainly wouldn't. With the Umbu protecting the Jinchuriki also missing, it was possible that the Jinchuriki had encountered danger. But among the ninjas on the Konoha front lines, there shouldn't be anyone capable of defeating the Jinchuriki. At that moment, the fourth Rakage seemed to remember something, his expression darkening as he said, "Killer Bee, do you remember the incident with Blue Bee?" Killer Bee nodded. He certainly recalled that Blue Bee had been assassinated by Orochimaru. If Blue Bee hadn't died, he wouldn't have been able to become the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki. The fourth Rakage continued, "I suspect that the Jinchuriki may have encountered an attack from Orochimaru, but even if she was attacked, the Jinchuriki should at least be able to send out a message." After analyzing for a while, the fourth Rakage couldn't come up with any useful strategies, and so he decided to suspend the frontline offensive and headed toward Kumogakure camp. Rather than racking his brains here, it would be better to hear his subordinates' opinions. Upon reaching Kumogakure camp, the fourth Rakage entered the command room. Inside, there were terrain maps laid out, and several Kumo Jonin were discussing the disappearance of the Jinchuriki. Sensing the footsteps behind him, the Kumo Jonin quickly turned to face the fourth Rakage and bowed, saying, "Fourth Lord, the search teams for the Jinchuriki have already set out. Here are the results they brought back." The fourth Rakage nodded. He wanted to hear his subordinates' opinions. Although Kumogakure was dominated by the Akatsuki clan, the disappearance of the Jinchuriki was a significant matter that concerned the future strategy of Kumogakure and whether they could seize the Land of Waterfalls. Upon hearing the fourth Rakage's command, a Jonin named Mabui lifted a kunai and pointed to a specific area on the map, saying, "Fourth Lord, the Umbu assigned to the Jinchuriki lost contact in this area, which is about 150 kilometers from the Konoha camp. In this area, there are traces left by an explosion of a tailed beast bomb in a nearby canyon. From this, we can deduce that the Jinchuriki likely encountered elite Konoha ninjas and used the tailed beast bomb as a trump card, but still couldn't escape Konoha's siege." After a pause, Mabui continued, "As for the matter of the Jinchuriki being captured by Konoha, none of us have any objections, but we are somewhat uncertain about the identity of the attackers. We don't know if it was Jeriah, Orochimaru, the third Hokage, or other ninjas. It was definitely Orochimaru's doing. He previously attacked Blue Bee." The fourth Rakage interrupted Mabui, speaking in an irrefutable tone. "Lord Rakage, if it really was Orochimaru, then that might actually be a good thing." After saying this, Mabui clapped his hands, and a cloud ninja entered with a sealed box. Upon opening the sealed box, several wooden fragments were revealed. "Isn't this just wood? What's so strange about it?" the fourth Rakage asked in confusion, not seeing anything wrong with the wood. Mabui rubbed his forehead, feeling somewhat helpless toward the fourth Rakage. She picked up the wood with her fingers and said solemnly, These pieces of wood were found at the scene, and they possess the ability to absorb chakra. Ability to absorb chakra. With Mabui's reminder, the fourth Rakage finally realized the seriousness of the matter and said gravely, "Would that absorbs chakra?" "That's would release, just like Hashirama Senju." "Are you saying that the ninja who attacked the Jinchuriki is a wood release user from Konoha?" Mabui slightly nodded. After placing the wood release artifacts back into the box, she slowly said, "Lord Rakage, before seeing these wood release artifacts, I also suspected it might be the work of Orochimaru or Jeriah, but after seeing these, I overturned my previous assumptions. Only a wood release user could silently defeat the Jinchuriki, others would find it difficult to do so." After hearing Mabui's analysis, the fourth Rakage's expression became uncertain as he pondered deeply. At this time, Mabui continued, "Lord Rakage, all of the above is just my speculation, but if Konoha truly has a wood release ninja village, we may need to delay our offensive plans." At this moment, Killer Bee seemed to remember something and said, "Mabui, you said Konoha has would release ninjas. Why did they still sit by during the Nine Tails incident? That doesn't make sense, and it's not like ninjas." Mabui gently shook her head and replied, "I don't know about that. Maybe the would release ninjas from Konoha were away at that time, or perhaps that ninja didn't like the fourth Hokage. However, according to the older generation of ninjas, Hashirama Senju's would release is invincible as all the tailed beasts were defeated by would release." Upon hearing this, Killer Bee didn't feel afraid. On the contrary, he seemed eager to take action. After a long silence, the fourth Rakage stood up and said, "Mabui, don't be intimidated by the wood release ninja. Hashirama Senju was just born earlier than us, since the ninjas of our time may not be inferior to those of his era. This village is no longer Kumogakure of the past. If Konoha were truly that strong, they wouldn't actively seek negotiations with the Hidden Mist and the Hidden Stone. It doesn't matter whether or not Konoha has would release ninjas, we must rescue the Jinchuriki as soon as possible to avoid being at a disadvantage." After the fourth Rakage's speech, the morale of the Kumo ninjas present rose significantly. Mabui seemed to be infused with the will of lightning, feeling incredibly excited as she said to the fourth Rakage, "Lord Rakage, what should we do next?" The fourth Rakage looked toward the land of fire and stated his plan. "Do not publicly announce the news of the Jinchuriki's disappearance for now. Let's pretend we are still unaware of this matter to mislead the Konoha ninja village, then secretly mobilize a large force from our village to put pressure on Konoha. As long as we exert enough pressure on the front lines, Konoha will be compelled to request negotiations, at which point we can demand the release of the Jinchuriki." "What if the Jinchuriki is already dead?" asked one of the Kumo Jonin. The fourth Rakage cast a glance at the Cloud Jonin and replied, "Then we'll take revenge for the Jinchuriki. We must obtain the title of the #1 ninja village this time and break the shackles that Konoha has placed on Kumogakure." Chapter 188, The Method for Uchiha to Become Hokage. The fourth Rakage's words greatly boosted the morale of the Kumo ninjas. The Hidden Cloud ninjas could accept dying in battle, but they could not accept compromising with their enemies. Even with heavy casualties, they must extract benefits from the enemy and make them pay an equal price. With such thoughts and principles, Kumogakure had been able to expand wildly in recent decades, swallowing up the small countries surrounding it. After confirming the plan to rescue the Jinchuriki, the fourth Rakage intended to continue his actions outside. However, Mabui stopped him and said seriously, "Lord Rakage, there are many matters that require your personal attention. You cannot leave everything to me, your assistant. You are the Rakage of the village." The fourth Rakage's expression darkened. He hated being cooped up in the office handling administrative affairs, and even when he was in the military camp, he disliked arranging tasks. Taking a deep breath, the fourth Rakage looked at Mabui and said, "Tell me everything important at once. I'll handle it all this time." Mabui nodded and took out several scrolls. "This is the casualty report from the Frontline ninjas. They encountered an attack from Uchiha ninjas. This is a list of logistical supplies. They were attacked by Hyuga ninjas. This is a letter from the feudal lord of the Land of Lightning, inquiring about how the battle is progressing. This is the casualty report from the troops stationed in the land of hot water. They recently encountered an attack from 2 bounty hunters and suffered severe losses. The fourth Rakage said impatiently, "Don't bother with the first few. Is there any problem in the land of hot water? I remember it was heavily guarded. How could they be attacked by bounty hunters with such severe losses? Ordinary bounty hunters are indeed difficult to deal with, but these 2 bounty hunters are not ordinary ninjas. They are the puppet master known as Akashi and the rogue ninja Kakuzu." Akashi the puppet master? Rogue ninja Kakuzu? The fourth Rakage seemed to have heard these 2 names somewhere before. However, isn't the puppet master a profession from Mangekyo? Why would he start hunting Kumo ninjas? As for the rogue ninja Kakuzu, he was a well-known bounty hunter, even having hunted the first Hokage. After pondering for a moment, the fourth Rakage said, "Since they are bounty hunters, is there any way to buy them over to our side? We could ask them to hunt Konoha ninjas and offer double the price." "I'll take care of that right away," Mabui nodded. After Mabui left, the fourth Rakage finally breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad he didn't have to deal with the tedious military affairs. This wasn't because he didn't care about the war. It was just that focusing on these trivial matters was not good for a ninja. A prolonged period of a comfortable life would make ninjas lose their sense of crisis, and their combat instincts and judgment would decline accordingly. They could still crush lower-level enemies with brute strength, but losing judgment when fighting equally strong opponents was fatal. This was also the reason he suddenly declared war on the Land of Fire since, after the loss of the brave 4th Hokage on the front lines, Konoha was left with only the aging 3rd Hokage. The 3rd Hokage hadn't gone to the front lines at all during the entire Third Great Ninja War. Even with the title of Ninja Hero, how much strength could he still exert? He was probably long past his prime and didn't even have the courage to head to the front lines anymore. From Fugaku, Shisui hurriedly found Byakuya. Byakuya's previous actions of capturing Shisui, Tekka, and others would surely infuriate his clansmen. If it weren't for his mediating presence, a violent conflict might have erupted. However, upon finding Byakuya, Shisui rubbed his eyes, questioning whether he was seeing things correctly. Contrary to Shisui's expectations, Byakuya did not have a conflict with his clansmen. Instead, he blended in seamlessly among the Uchiha, creating a harmonious atmosphere. At that moment, Tekka and others noticed Shisui and said, "Shisui, you're finally back. What did the clan leader call you over for? Were you asked to properly host Byakuya?" Shisui, feeling a bit bewildered, replied, "Something like that. He asked me questions related to Byakuya." "That's good. I'll tell you, Byakuya is one of the few ninjas who can understand us Uchihas. Such ninjas are quite rare." Shisui was still a bit confused. After signaling Byakuya to follow him, he whispered, "Lord Byakuya, what exactly did you talk about with them? They've always been cold to outsiders, let alone showing this kind of enthusiasm." Byakuya revealed a sly smile and replied, "Nothing much, just demonstrated my overwhelming strength and casually talked bad about the Senju clan with them." "I see," Shisui slightly nodded. Criticizing the Senju clan was indeed a hot topic among the Uchiha. However, Byakuya wasn't even Uchiha. Why had he integrated into the clan so quickly, while he, the legitimate Uchiha, felt somewhat out of place? But just talking bad about the Senju shouldn't lead to such enthusiasm. Seemingly sensing Shisui's thoughts, Byakuya said lightly, "Of course, it's not just about talking bad. I also shared some experiences imparted by my predecessors and told them that some things need to be fought for on their own." Shisui's expression darkened as he stared at Byakuya. "Lord Byakuya, that probably isn't good advice. Do you intend to incite the Uchiha to initiate a coup?" Byakuya also looked at Shisui, gradually retracting his smile. With a serious expression, he said, "Shisui, you're truly clever. I did share with them the fastest way to become Hokage, which is to stage a military coup. Only by staging a military coup can the Uchiha hope to become Hokage. You're right, Lord Byakuya, but if the coup fails, the Uchiha will be utterly doomed. Even if it succeeds, Konoha will be left in tatters." As Shisui spoke, his expression became extremely grave, with malice surging in his eyes. Sensing the malice emanating from Shisui, Byakuya chuckled and said, "Don't be so sensitive. I merely shared experiences. As for whether to incite the Uchiha to stage a coup is really up to you, the Uchiha with Mangekyo Sharingan. You should think about how our Akatsuki organization became the rulers of Mangekyo." Upon hearing this, Shisui frowned, puzzled, and asked, "Wasn't it because you and Yahiko were valued by Hanzo of the Salamander, which led to your selection as successors? Did you not receive orders from Hanzo this time?" Byakuya smiled and said, "No one can command me. My coming here to support your Konoha was entirely my own idea. As for my relationship with Hanzo, that was merely a transaction of interests. Actually, our Akatsuki forced Hanzo of the Salamander to compromise with our strength. Now I wonder what your Uchiha plan to do?" Chapter 189, Byakuya's Ambition. After listening to how Byakuya seized the position of leader of Mangekyo, Shisui fell into deep contemplation. Previously, he had no idea about Byakuya's rise alongside Yahiko and others, where he genuinely believed that Byakuya had been valued by Hanzo of the Salamander and thus chosen as the successor for Mangekyo. But unexpectedly, the public narrative of Mangekyo was merely a facade. What truly transpired was a rebellion. However, after the coup that overthrew Hanzo's rule, for the sake of stability, Byakuya and the others did not directly eliminate Hanzo but rather stripped him of his power. Reflecting on this, Shisui began to feel lost again. Even his Mangekyo Sharingan couldn't help him see a clear path ahead. Why must the clansmen pursue the position of Hokage? Why is it that they yearn to become Hokage, despite the limited benefits it brings? Why couldn't they coexist harmoniously with other ninjas in the village? At that moment, Shisui seemed to recall something and said to Byakuya, "Didn't you say before that the Uchiha's pursuit of the Hokage position would bring misfortune? Why are you sharing your coup experience with my clansmen this time?" Byakuya said meaningfully, "Becoming Hokage is the Uchiha's will. Unless faced with a heavy blow, the Uchiha will never abandon the pursuit of becoming Hokage." "A heavy blow?" Shisui asked, confused and eager to know the answer. Byakuya extended his finger towards the Uchiha camp and then pointed at himself. The former Uzumaki clan also believed that Konoha was a good ally until they encountered a national extermination crisis, after which the surviving members understood that Konoha was not to be trusted. If the Uchiha were to face a clan extermination crisis, the remaining members would become much clearer about their goals. Extermination crisis? Shisui frowned. If they truly faced such a crisis, the remaining clansmen would indeed give up on becoming Hokage, but that price seemed far too heavy. Moreover, the Uchiha currently did not seem to be facing any extermination crisis. At this moment, Byakuya said thoughtfully, "In normal circumstances, the Uchiha would not encounter an extermination crisis, but that would change if you attempted a coup. Given the current trend, the probability of the Uchiha staging a coup in the future is not low. So, to leave a few embers for your Uchiha clan, why not send some weaker clansmen to me? This way, they won't end up in a situation of death and extermination." After hearing this, Shisui froze momentarily, then stared intently at Byakuya. After testing him for so long, Byakuya finally revealed his true intentions. His keen interest in the Uchiha clan was indeed due to his desire for the Sharingan bloodline. However, unlike others who sought to seize the Sharingan, Byakuya wanted the entire Uchiha clan. This was why he frequently crossed paths with Shisui, continuously instilling the idea that the Uchiha could not become Hokage and would eventually instigate a coup. But the most terrifying part was that what Byakuya said was true. It reflected the reality unfolding within the clan. After pondering for a moment, Shisui gently shook his head. "I'm sorry, Byakuya-sama. I can't control the thoughts of the other clansmen, let alone send them to Mangekyo. It's fine. You will come to understand in due time. After this battle is over, you'll realize it." Regarding Shisui's rejection, Byakuya didn't take it to heart. If one could easily persuade a prominent family like the Uchiha with mere words, Konoha would have long since crumbled. Konoha was a village established by two idealists, built on their own beliefs. No matter how great the pressure they faced, it would not change the Uchiha's obsession with Konoha and the Hokage position unless the Uchiha's beliefs were to collapse. After chatting idly with Shisui for a while, Byakuya temporarily left the Uchiha camp, casting one last glance at Shisui as he departed. He wasn't worried that Shisui would reveal what he had said. After all, he was Hanzo's disciple, and Yahiko, Konan, and the others were his close friends and allies, making them targets that Konoha was trying to win over. And who was Shisui? Just a restless member of the Uchiha clan. Even if Shisui rushed to the Hokage building to repeat his words to the higher-ups in Konoha, the only one who would truly doubt him would probably be Danzo Shimura. However, it went without saying what Danzo's attitude toward the Uchiha was. In the following weeks, Byakuya frequently traveled between the borders of the Land of Fire and the Konoha camp, hunting down isolated cloud ninjas while building good relationships with Konoha's jonin. With his outstanding strength and medical ninjutsu, he got to know quite a few of Konoha's jonin. On a certain day, 2 weeks later, Byakuya's ring became hot, indicating that he had received intel from Sasori and Kakuzu. This was not the first time he had received intel from Sasori and Kakuzu. During the days he had been out on his own, Sasori and Kakuzu had also taken down several cloud ninjas. Their actions had caught the attention of the higher-ups in Kumogakure. Initially, when Byakuya read the intel sent by Sasori and Kakuzu, his expression became strange, marveling at the vastness of the ninja world and its wonders. After several failed ambushes, the higher-ups in Kumogakure developed the idea of recruiting Sasori and Kakuzu. Since rogue ninjas work for money, rather than going through the trouble of ambushing them, they might as well directly recruit them. In light of this proposal, Sasori and Kakuzu seemed tempted and came to ask for Byakuya's opinion. After some consideration, Byakuya provided a vague answer. He neither opposed nor agreed, tacitly accepting Sasori and Kakuzu's actions. Arranging for Sasori and Kakuzu to become mercenaries for Kumogakure would not only weaken Konoha's strength on the battlefield but also allow him to gain insight into Kumogakure's movements, preparing for his upcoming plans. His efforts in coming to Konoha and Kumogakure front were not solely for the sake of earning bounty money or recruiting the Uchiha clan, they were also to make the Akatsuki's name known and establish it as a famous organization in the ninja world. The intel sent by Sasori and Kakuzu this time was quite simple. It contained descriptions of the situation at the Kumogakure camp. First, Kumogakure had not disclosed the disappearance of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. The cloud ninjas thought he was simply out on a mission. Second, the number of ninjas around the Kumogakure camp had clearly increased in recent weeks. These two pieces of intel led Byakuya into deep thought. Kumogakure's silence regarding the Two-Tails' disappearance was likely aimed at maintaining morale, while the increased number of ninjas on the front indicated that Kumogakure had significant actions planned. Coupled with the reduced number of patrols from Cloud Ninja teams over the past few days, Byakuya came to a conclusion. If all went according to expectations, the physically strong yet not overly clever 4th Rakage was planning to engage Konoha in a decisive battle. This wasn't necessarily good news for the Akatsuki. Only prolonged warfare could maximize the depletion of both Konoha and Kumogakure's strength. However, it was clear that Kumogakure had no intention of dragging things out, and Mangekyo also could not intervene in this war. But the inability of Mangekyo to interfere in the conflict between Konoha and Kumogakure didn't mean that the Akatsuki couldn't take action against the surrounding smaller ninja villages during this period. Thinking of this, Byakuya looked at the ring on his hand and issued orders to the Akatsuki. Chapter 190. Are you ready? A few days later, the Konoha front faced a large-scale attack from the Cloud Ninjas. At first, Jeriah, Fugaku, and Kakashi, among other jonin, thought this was just another feint by the Cloud Ninjas, similar to previous feints. The purpose was to distract Konoha's elite forces and then take the opportunity to assault the Konoha camp. However, as outposts along the border began to go missing one by one, Jeriah and the others gradually realized something was amiss. This time, the Cloud Ninjas did not seem to be feigning an attack but were genuinely preparing to assault the Konoha camp. At that moment, a Hyuga jonin who had gone to scout the front line entered the command room. Jeriah noticed the Hyuga jonin responsible for reconnaissance and quickly asked, Hayashi, are the Cloud Ninjas really on their way here? Hayashi nodded. The Byakugan's insight does not lie. I indeed saw hundreds of ninjas heading towards the camp, and among them, several leading ninjas possessed immense chakra. They should be the fourth Rakage and the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. Jeriah nodded. He trusted Hayashi's judgment. Although this Hyuga Jonin was from the branch family, his strength was on par with the main family head, Hisashi Hyuga. The two were even twin brothers. At this moment, Shikaku Nara seemed to remember something and asked Hayashi, only two individuals possess chakra at the level of tailed beasts? There's no third person? Hayashi shook his head. Only these two, since the Two Tails Jinchuriki, Yujito Ni, is not in the group. She might still be within the borders of the Land of Fire. Upon hearing this, Shikaku and Jeriah exchanged glances, feeling a bit relieved. On the side, Uchiha Fugaku said, Hayashi, Yujito Ni is already dead at Shisui's hands. It's natural for her absence from the group. Yujito is dead? Hayashi's eyes widened. Due to the information being kept confidential for the time being, the news of the Two Tails Jinchuriki's death had not yet been made public, as on one hand, they hadn't found her body, and on the other, Konoha's higher-ups didn't want to provoke Kumogakure. Jeriah nodded and then said, Yujito Ni is indeed dead. This large-scale attack by the Cloud Ninjas is likely related to that, but if the fourth Rakage and Killer Bee are leading the charge, it's going to be very difficult for us to win. Very difficult. Hayashi fell silent, as that was a rather euphemistic way for Jeriah to put it. In reality, on the battlefield against Kumogakure, the Cloud Ninjas had been at a significant advantage. This was partly due to their larger number of Jonin and partly because the fourth Rakage and Killer Bee were incredibly strong together. At that moment, Choza Akimichi seemed to remember something and asked Jeriah, Lord Jeriah, hasn't the Hokage sent anyone to support us yet? Jiraiya's expression changed slightly as he shook his head, saying, the village still has to defend against attacks from Iwagakure and Kirigakure. They don't have any extra personnel at the moment since the current personnel are already at their limit. Hayashi expressed some confusion, saying, what about Lord Orochimaru? Why hasn't Lord Orochimaru come to support the front line? With Danzo Shimura and Hamura Mitokado on the Iwagakure and Kirigakure fronts, isn't that enough? I don't know. Orochimaru seems to have gone missing recently, and there hasn't been much news. Jeriah was also quite helpless. He had prided himself on his intelligence network, yet he couldn't locate Orochimaru recently, which left him feeling frustrated and worried. Hearing that the village could hardly provide support, the morale of the ninjas present undoubtedly dropped significantly. Without a second shadow-level powerhouse, they might truly struggle against the AB combination. Although the Ino-Shikacho trio could resist shadow-level powerhouses in a short-term engagement, it was merely resistance. The Cloud side also had similarly strong Jonin combinations that could exert pressure on them. At this moment, Fugaku Uchiha spoke up. Commander Jeriah, although the Cloud Ninja side is coming in full force, our village is not without the ability to resist. As for the Uchiha clan, we can at least delay the Eight Tails Jinchuriki for some time. Moreover, since Shisui was able to take down the Two Tails Jinchuriki, the Uchiha can handle the Eight Tails as well. Upon hearing Fugaku's words, Shikaku and the others exchanged subtle glances, but they felt it was not the right time to dampen morale. True, Shisui had defeated the Two Tails, but it was under circumstances that had a high degree of outside assistance. Without Byakuya's help, how could Shisui possibly defeat and kill the Two Tails Jinchuriki? For the sake of village unity, they could hold their noses and acknowledge the Uchiha's achievements, but the Uchiha had to be aware of the truth in their hearts. At this moment, Jeriah seemed to remember something and said, Byakuya should be nearby the camp. If he is willing to lend a hand, we might have a chance to defeat the Cloud. Shikaku replied, if Mangekyo is willing to act, it could naturally change the course of the war, but how do you plan to persuade Byakuya? This battle is different from the previous ones. A real man draws in others, Jeriah said confidently. I believe Byakuya will firmly stand on the side of justice. Despite Jiraiya's somewhat dubious statement, Shikaku felt resigned but had to trust him. If everyone truly united and brought in outside assistance, overcoming this crisis wouldn't be too difficult. Seeing that everyone ignoring him, Fugaku clenched his fists. It was precisely because the other ninjas in the village looked down on the Uchiha that he wanted to achieve more merit, become the 5th Hokage of the village, and take revenge for the humiliation he felt in that moment. After exchanging intelligence, Jeriah and the other Jonin began tactical discussions. If Konoha chose to set an ambush, leveraging the terrain and waiting for the enemy, Konoha should be able to win the first wave of the attack. However, if the enemy chose to bombard them with tailed beast bombs directly, gathering for an ambush would only make them live targets. While Jeriah and the others engaged in tactical discussions, Konoha's Umbu found Byakuya outside the camp. At this time, Byakuya was with Shisui, gazing towards the land of lightning, lost in thought. Noticing the Umbu behind him, Byakuya frowned and asked, "What's the new assignment?" The Umbu, aware of Byakuya's capabilities, quickly nodded and said, "Lord Jeriah asked me to inform you that the 4th Rakage and the 8 Tails Jinchuriki are approaching this location. If possible, please assist Konoha. If you feel pressured, Lord Byakuya, you can leave now. There's no need to get involved in the war between Konoha and the Cloud." Byakuya was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, "Jeriah is still using the goading tactic. Don't worry. I won't leave. I was just thinking of fighting the 4th Rakage to see how strong he really is." Hearing this, the Umbu respectfully nodded and then returned to the command room to report the information. After the Konoha Umbu left, Byakuya turned to Shisui and said lightly, "Shisui, a great battle is about to begin. Are you ready?" Chapter 191, 8 Tails Beast Bomb. "Shisui, a big battle is about to start. Are you ready for it?" After hearing this, Shisui didn't immediately reply to Byakuya. Instead, he focused intently on the distant forest, also sensing the tense atmosphere in the air. After spending time together over the past few days, Shisui had come to understand that beneath Byakuya's harmless appearance, there was a hidden devil. Byakuya was like a devil, manipulating both him and his clan, pushing the Uchiha step by step toward rebellion. His ultimate goal was to bring the entire Uchiha clan under his control. If Shisui were the same as he had been a few years ago, he would have already used Kodo Amatsukami on Byakuya. Although Kodo Amatsukami might not be able to completely solve the problem of this monster before him, it could at least alter Byakuya's will, stopping him from targeting the Uchiha clan. But now, Shisui was hesitating. He wasn't sure if the Uchiha were on the path of destruction, just like the Uzumaki clan had been. After all, the relationship between the Uzumaki and Senju clans had been far better than that between the Senju and Uchiha. When the Uzumaki clan was besieged, the wife of the first Hokage, Uzumaki Mido, had still been alive. After a moment of silence, the two of them returned to the command center. There, they found Jeriah and the others fully prepared for battle. Jeriah didn't waste any time with small talk and got straight to the point. According to the Hyuga ninjas' intelligence, more than 3,000 Cloud ninjas are attacking our position. We have over 1,000 defenders on the front lines, enough to hold off the direct assault. Your mission is to hunt down the elite ninjas roaming along the battle lines. After hearing the details of their mission, both Byakuya and Shisui nodded, then left the command room. Not long after they left the camp, Byakuya stopped and pointed southeast. "Shisui, the enemy is here, just 3 kilometers away in the bushes." As soon as he finished speaking, Byakuya used the body flicker technique and disappeared. And, just some heads up before anyone starts complaining. 80% of Chinese authors' knowledge comes from other fanfics, not original source where body flicker technique is common to use. I have seen this in 90% of Chinese fanfics, and after some diggings, I found the same. So, if you find some inconsistencies, bear in mind that not many authors try to clear plot holes by going to their own investigation from original source. Hearing that the enemy was only 3 kilometers away, Shisui gained a new understanding of Byakuya's sensory abilities. A 3-kilometer range was comparable to the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan. Byakuya truly had no weaknesses as a ninja. Without thinking too much, Shisui followed Byakuya, and the two vanished into the forest. It didn't take long for them to encounter the vanguard of the Cloud Ninjas. These vanguard ninjas were all elite Chunin. Though not particularly powerful individually, their teamwork allowed them to exert strength comparable to that of Jonin. However, even Jonin-level ninjas stood no chance against Byakuya and Shisui. Although both of them were Jonin, their strength far surpassed that of most other Jonin. After slicing through a kunai, Shisui swiftly slit an enemy's throat and, in the blink of an eye, appeared next to another, driving the broken kunai into the Cloud Ninja's heart. While Shisui fought with a graceful and agile style, Byakuya's combat was simple and direct. He either flew into the sky and bombarded the enemy with exploding tags or unleashed large-scale water release techniques to flood the surrounding forest. Cloud ninjas hit by Byakuya's attacks often didn't even leave behind a body. Seeing this, the remaining Cloud ninjas realized they had run into a tough opponent. The two young ninja in front of them were clearly not on the same level as the Cloud ninja. Only the elite Jonin from their village would be able to deal with these two monsters. With this realization, the Cloud ninja exchanged glances and decided to retreat for now and wait for reinforcements. Due to the large number of vanguard ninjas, Byakuya and Shisui were unable to stop them from sending out a message. After dealing with all the nearby enemies, Byakuya habitually started collecting spoils of war. Seeing how calm Byakuya remained, Shisui's fear of him grew even stronger. This boy, who was even younger than himself, seemed almost as if he was born for war. As Shisui marveled at Byakuya's composure, a sense of mortal danger suddenly welled up in his heart. Byakuya also sensed something and looked into the distance. A pitch-black-tailed beast bomb shot out from a distant cliff, heading straight toward their position. Seeing this, Shisui activated his Mangekyo Sharingan, ready to summon Susanoo at any moment. However, Byakuya raised a hand to stop him, frowning as he said, "The tailed beast bomb isn't aimed at us. Don't waste your chakra." Before Byakuya had even finished speaking, the tailed beast bomb streaked past overhead and crashed in the direction of the Konoha camp. Boom! With the rumbling of the earth and sky, a mushroom cloud rose in the direction of the Konoha camp. Shisui's heart sank as he wondered how many Konoha ninjas had perished in that single attack. Byakuya patted Shisui on the shoulder and said, "This is the power of a Jinchuriki. If you hadn't taken down Yujito back then, there would be two tailed beast bombs falling on the Konoha camp right now." Shisui nodded but then suddenly remembered something and looked at Byakuya. Wait, since when was Yujito his kill? Wasn't it Byakuya who had forcefully subdued her with wood release? This was just part of their agreement. There was no need to pretend when no outsiders were around. Noticing the strange look in Shisui's eyes, Byakuya chuckled quietly to himself. This was exactly the effect he wanted. When a lie is repeated enough times, the truth no longer matters. It was just like the title of the strongest Hokage. At first, it might have been a way to stabilize people's hearts, but eventually, even Byakuya started believing it himself. Returning from his wandering thoughts, the two continued hunting Cloud ninjas in the forest. With their highly efficient teamwork, they nearly wiped out the Cloud ninjas in the surrounding area, which naturally drew the attention of the Cloud's main forces. After confirming their location, Killer Bee, in his tailed beast form, began gathering chakra in his mouth. Moments later, a tailed beast bomb with an 80 to 20 balance of yin and yang chakra formed and was launched at Byakuya and Shisui. As the symbol of destruction tore through the sky with a supersonic roar, even Byakuya sensed the danger within it. He quickly formed hand seals and shouted, "Wood release, wood locking wall." In an instant, a bowl-shaped wooden structure materialized, covering the ground like an inverted bowl. With a deafening explosion, the tailed beast bomb hit the ground, unleashing a massive wave of energy in all directions. Even the previously uneven terrain was flattened by the blast. A few moments later, Byakuya and Shisui emerged from the wooden structure. Surveying the now leveled forest around them, Shisui's expression changed. He had thought that Yujito was already an incredibly powerful Jinchuriki, but the destructive power of the Eight Tails Jinchuriki was on a whole different level. Byakuya, however, wasn't paying attention to the landscape. His focus was entirely on Killer Bee. For Killer Bee to dare attack him like this, it was time to teach this inexperienced Eight-Tails Jinchuriki the harsh realities of the ninja world. With that thought, Byakuya grabbed Shisui, and they flew into the sky, heading straight for Killer Bee's position. Chapter 192, The Advance of the Fourth Rakage. For Shisui, it was his first time experiencing the feeling of flying. As they flew higher and higher, the ground beneath them gradually became distant and insignificant. The battle between the Konoha and Cloud ninjas below seemed like nothing more than ants fighting, completely detached from him. At that moment, Shisui suddenly thought of Byakuya, who was carrying him through the sky. He finally began to understand Byakuya's perspective. Once you master the ability to fly and reach a certain level of power, the battles between ninjas become meaningless. It felt as though one had become a god, overlooking the entire world. Was this how Byakuya had always viewed Konoha and the Uchiha? Shisui's thoughts didn't last long, as the Cloud ninjas on the ground had already noticed them and began pulling out weapons to aim at them. Normal kunai and shuriken had an effective range of only a few dozen meters. Standard lightning and water release techniques also struggled to hit enemies in the high sky. The only weapon capable of dealing damage was the kunai launcher used for attacking tailed beasts. However, even if a kunai launcher pierced Byakuya's body, it would do no real harm. Taking advantage of their altitude, Byakuya began raining explosive tags down on the enemy. The tags fell like snowflakes, each one causing a small-scale explosion upon hitting the ground. Under this near-saturation bombing of explosive tags, countless Cloud ninjas scattered in all directions, but many still couldn't escape the blast radius. Only those who managed to hide under cover barely survived. Seeing this, Shisui gained a new appreciation for efficiency. He had always thought that his clan members, with their Sharingan activated, were killing machines on the battlefield. But Byakuya was something else entirely, a demon. If Byakuya had launched a similar attack on the Cloud forces earlier, this war might have ended long ago. Whoosh! From the ground, Killer Bee launched another tailed beast bomb. The roaring projectile was dodged by Byakuya, creating a second sun in the sky as it exploded. Without wasting any words, Byakuya continued his counterattack, throwing more explosive tags as he flew over Killer Bee, bombarding him relentlessly. Though the tailed beast form of Killer Bee was impervious to the explosions, the Cloud ninjas around him weren't so fortunate. The blinding flashes of the exploding tags left everyone disoriented, while the violent shockwaves and detonations made it difficult to even stand still. Such an intense battle naturally drew the attention of everyone on the battlefield. Inside the Konoha camp, Jeriah had just summoned Gamabunta to block a previous tailed beast bomb. Now, he was leading his troops in defending against the main Cloud force. And on the opposing side, the commander was none other than the Fourth Rakage, A. After engaging with the Fourth Rakage, Jeriah truly felt the overwhelming strength of his opponent. The Rakage wasn't particularly skilled in ninjutsu or jinjutsu. But with his sheer speed and power, the Rakage could easily defeat Jonin, even shattering low-level ninjutsu with a single punch, turning the tide of battle against Konoha's Jonin. Faced with the ferocious assault of the Fourth Rakage, Jeriah anxiously asked the toad on his shoulder, "Master Fukasaku, how much longer until I complete Sage Mode?" "Don't rush, Jeriah boy. Gathering natural energy isn't that easy," Fukasaku replied. "Please hurry, Master Fukasaku. I don't think Shikaku and the others can hold out much longer. Besides the Fourth Rakage, there's also the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki lurking nearby, ready to strike." Shima, the female toad sage, scoffed and said, "It's not that bad. The Jinchuriki has already been held up. There's quite an intense battle happening over there." Jeriah was momentarily stunned, then looked off into the distance. There, the sky was shrouded in dark clouds, with flashes of lightning and streaks of red clouds within them. The ground trembled from distant shocks. Seeing this, Jeriah muttered to himself, "Isn't that the direction where Byakuya and Shisui are? Looks like they're the ones fighting the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki." The Fourth Rakage also noticed the commotion coming from Byakuya's direction and narrowed his gazes. He had confidence in his brother Killer Bee's strength, but the fact that Killer Bee hadn't come to support him yet suggested trouble. Was Bee facing someone like Orochimaru, or maybe Danzo or the third Hokage himself? Or, perhaps, was the Konoha ninja who had taken down Yujito back at it again? At this thought, the fourth Rakage felt a surge of unease. He immediately increased the output of his lightning release chakra mode and charged straight at Jeriah. As long as he could eliminate Jeriah, the commander, this offensive would be over. At that moment, the Konoha ninjas realized the Rakage's panic and rushed forward. They shared the same thought: if they could take down the strongest Rakage, the war would quickly end. However, the exhausted members of the Ino-Shikacho trio were no match for the fourth Rakage. The Shadow Possession Jutsu couldn't keep up with his speed, making the mind-body switch technique useless. The Expansion Jutsu, in front of the Rakage's agility, was nothing more than a joke. Seeing this, Uchiha Fugaku led the Uchiha clan members to face off against the Rakage. The Uchiha Jonin all activated their three-tomo Sharingan and tried to trap the fourth Rakage in a Jinjutsu, but the Rakage didn't give them a chance to make eye contact. He darted around the battlefield, and the blinding lightning surrounding him blocked the activation of their Jinjutsu. Realizing their illusions were ineffective, Fugaku quickly used the body flicker technique to appear in front of the Rakage and stabbed at him with a kunai. Clang! The kunai snapped in half upon contact with the Rakage's hardened body, falling to the ground in pieces. The fourth Rakage broke through the Uchiha encirclement and continued his charge toward Jeriah. At that moment, Hisashi Hyuga and the Hyuga clan appeared before the Rakage. With a swift movement, Hisashi appeared in front of him and performed the 8 trigrams palm rotation. As Hisashi spun like a top, a whirlwind appeared on the spot, forcefully stopping the Rakage's advance. Other Hyuga ninjas quickly joined the fray, shouting, 8 trigrams, 32 palms. A flurry of precise strikes rained down on the Rakage, leaving white marks on his skin. A faint smile appeared on Hisashi's lips. He knew the fourth Rakage's defense was comparable to a tailed beast's, but the gentle fist technique excelled at bypassing outer defenses and attacking the internal organs. No matter how strong the Rakage was, his organs couldn't be harder than steel. However, the fourth Rakage endured the gentle fist attacks, pressing onward until he was right in front of Jeriah. With a fierce punch, he aimed directly at Jeriah, who was kneeling on the ground, still gathering natural energy. His fist was mere inches from Jeriah's face. In the next moment, Jeriah raised his head and caught the Rakage's fist with his hand. His face was now painted with oil and markings, radiating a powerful aura. This was none other than the Sage Mode of Mount Maiboku. Chapter 193, Shisui vs. Killer Bee. On the other side, after dealing with the weaker Cloud Ninjas on the ground, Byakuya gently descended with Shisui. The Cloud Ninjas, who had suffered heavy losses, gripped their weapons tightly as they surrounded the two with bloodshot eyes and gritted teeth, their resolve burning fiercely. Seeing this, Byakuya patted Shisui's shoulder and casually said, "I'm not really good at fighting. I'll leave the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki to you. I'll handle these Cloud Ninja fodder." Hearing this, Shisui's face turned pale. Suppressing the Two-Tails Jinchuriki and bombing the Cloud Ninja's main forces, did he really consider that not good at fighting? However, with the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee, closing in, Shisui had no choice but to steel himself. Locking eyes with Bee, Shisui activated his Sharingan and cast a Jinjutsu. For a moment, the three-tomo reflection appeared in Bee's eyes, and he fell under the Jinjutsu's control. Having learned from his previous encounter with Bee, Shisui didn't let his guard down. He threw a few kunai wrapped with explosive tags and charged toward Killer Bee with his sword. However, Killer Bee, completely unfazed by the Jinjutsu, easily knocked the kunai aside with his sword, causing the explosive tags to detonate behind him. Seeing Shisui use the body flicker technique, Bee calmly pulled out more swords and, using his seven-sword style, skillfully engaged Shisui in a fight, managing to fend off both his real body and his illusions. Shisui's face changed slightly, but he quickly shifted into the Mangekyo Sharingan form and launched another assault on Killer Bee. Byakuya stood still, observing the battle between Shisui and Killer Bee, quietly assessing Bee's strength. Unlike Yujito, who specialized in ambush tactics, Killer Bee excelled in direct combat. Both his taijutsu and ninjutsu were at the Kaguya level, making him one of the top Kaguya level combatants in the entire ninja world. Against someone like Shisui, who had barely reached the Kaguya level thanks to his Mangekyo Sharingan, was naturally at a significant disadvantage. Even if Shisui used his last resort, Kodo Amatsukami, it would still be difficult for him to beat Killer Bee. The reason was simple. Kodo Amatsukami might seem like a high-tier ability, allowing Shisui to subtly alter an enemy's will without them realizing it. This ability was indeed nearly unbeatable in one-on-one combat. However, Kodo Amatsukami had several serious flaws. It could be detected and even dispelled. Additionally, it could only control a single target at a time and couldn't fully manipulate a Jinchuriki. Looking at the current situation, Shisui was bound to lose to Killer Bee sooner or later unless he used Susanoo to fight Bee head-on. But Bee could also enter full-tailed beast mode. While Byakuya was carefully analyzing the situation, the nearby cloud ninjas swarmed around him. They surrounded Byakuya, but none of them dared to attack first. The memory of his devastating bombing assault still lingered, making them hesitant and fearful. Ignoring their indecision, Byakuya calmly pulled out a summoning scroll from his robe. Seeing this, the cloud ninjas grew even more anxious, fearing that Byakuya was about to summon another powerful weapon to attack them. However, as the white smoke cleared, all that appeared was a small stool. Sitting on the small stool, Byakuya leisurely looked around at the surrounding cloud ninjas and shouted, "I know none of you have balls to attack me, but I also don't want to kill too many people either. So how about this? If you all just stay where you are and don't interfere in this battle, I won't intervene either. Let's just sit back and watch this farce together, alright?" Byakuya's relaxed tone and friendly smile made him appear like a peaceful mediator. However, the cloud ninjas knew all too well that this seemingly harmless boy had just slaughtered hundreds of their comrades in the earlier fight. Faced with such terrifying power, even the battle-hardened cloud ninjas, known for their warrior spirit, couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. At the same time, Shisui's strength also shocked them. When had the Uchiha clan produced a ninja capable of fighting on equal footing with Lord Killer Bee? And what was with that strange Sharingan? Could it be the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan? With these thoughts running through their minds, the cloud ninjas, despite wanting to assist Killer Bee, didn't dare to move after hearing Byakuya's words. A growing desire to flee took root in their hearts. They weren't afraid of dying but feared dying for no reason. If their deaths could help Cloud Village expand its territory, they would willingly give their lives. But with no real gains to be had, they didn't want to throw their lives away meaninglessly. As these thoughts swirled, a strange scene unfolded on the battlefield. On one side, Shisui and Killer Bee were locked in intense combat. On the other, Byakuya sat watching the battle with amusement, surrounded by cloud ninjas too frightened to move. Killer Bee also noticed the bizarre situation, his expression growing more serious. Although he had the upper hand against Shisui thanks to his advantage as a Jinchuriki, he still had to remain vigilant against Byakuya, who watched them like a hawk from the sidelines. By this point, he had a vague sense of how Ujito had disappeared. Ujito was likely defeated by Shisui and Byakuya. After all, Shisui alone was strong enough to challenge her, and with Byakuya's help, defeating her would have been easy. With this in mind, Killer Bee mentally called out, Kyuki, are you there? What do you make of that kid over there?" The Eight Tails, Kyuki, who was used to Killer Bee's constant rapping, stirred at his call. As it spread its chakra outward, it spotted Byakuya sitting in the distance and frowned, replying, "I don't know who that kid is, but his chakra level is on par with a tailed beast." "Are you sure?" Killer Bee asked, unusually serious. Kyuki nodded and said, "I don't want to believe it either, but there are quite a few monsters in the ninja world with chakra rivaling a tailed beast. Your brother is one of them, and that kid is another. Plus, I'm sensing a few familiar auras from him. You'd best not provoke him." Killer Bee's expression shifted. He knew what Gyuki's warning implied, but he also trusted his brother's judgment. Could it be that the Cloud Village was truly heading toward a crushing defeat today? With that thought, Killer Bee leapt high into the air, gazing toward the distant Konoha camp. Within the Konoha camp, several massive chakra signatures could be felt. One of them was intensely violent, brimming with lightning chakra, which was undoubtedly his brother, the Rakage. The other chaotic signature was unknown. But whatever the case, it seemed his brother was facing trouble and needed his help as soon as possible. Glancing at Shisui, who was still engaged in their battle, Killer Bee quickly formed hand seals. Several blobs of ink split from his body, instantly taking his shape. The ink clones then self-destructed on the spot, and in the ensuing chaos, Killer Bee took the opportunity to slip away. Chapter 194, The Ridiculous Cloud and Konoha. Emerging from the explosion of the ink clone, Shisui did not pursue the retreating Killer Bee. Instead, he turned to Byakuya, who had been watching the battle for some time, and curiously asked, "Lord Byakuya, why didn't you stop Killer Bee?" Byakuya, remembering something, replied, "Killer Bee's strength is not on the same level as Yujito's. Even if the two of us join forces, it would be a tough battle. There's no need to complicate things further. Besides, the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan isn't quite as legendary as I expected. You're much weaker than the fabled Madara Uchiha. You can't even fully control a Jinchuriki." Shisui fell silent. While the Mangekyo had indeed enhanced his strength, apart from Susanoo, the other improvements were not as significant. It certainly wasn't as overwhelmingly powerful as the legend suggested. Byakuya chuckled, then said, "Madara Uchiha wasn't that strong from the beginning either. One day, your power might surpass his, but for now, you should focus on yourself. Your Mangekyo has already been exposed. Killer Bee saw your Sharingan, and so did all these cloud ninjas." Hearing this, Shisui glanced at the trembling cloud ninjas nearby and sighed softly. "Ever since that day, I stopped trying to hide my Mangekyo. Only by showing enough strength can I protect the clan. Protecting the Uchiha with just this power won't be enough. It's not only the people in the Hokage building who are plotting against your clan." Byakuya gave Shisui a meaningful look, then said, "The ones who will ultimately destroy the Uchiha will be the Uchiha themselves." Shisui pondered this cryptic statement, feeling that Byakuya was hinting at something, but he had no idea what exactly. He looked at Byakuya again, only to see him with an inscrutable expression, which left Shisui feeling even more perplexed. Sighing, Shisui gave up trying to figure it out and said, "Lord Byakuya, I'll go help Lord Jeriah. I'll leave these cloud ninjas to you." With that, Shisui disappeared in a flash. After Shisui left, Byakuya turned his attention to the cloud ninjas. He found a Jonin who looked like a leader and directly asked, "Where are Sasori of the Red Sand and Kakuzu?" The cloud Jonin was momentarily stunned, then his face twisted in terror. Sasori and Kakuzu were external mercenaries Cloud Village had recruited recently. They had killed many Konoha shinobi on behalf of Cloud. How could this Konoha ninja know them? At that moment, the Jonin realized something terrifying. Byakuya must be in the same organization as Kakuzu and Sasori. They were all mercenaries who knew each other, manipulating the war from the shadows. In front of them, both Konoha and Cloud were nothing but playthings. How ridiculous! Seeing that the Cloud Jonin was unwilling to answer, Byakuya immediately used Jinjutsu to force the information out of him. He quickly learned the location of Sasori and Kakuzu and vanished into the forest. As Byakuya disappeared using the body flicker technique, the surrounding cloud ninjas let out a collective sigh of relief. The boy, who had descended upon them like a demon lord, was finally gone. But was there even a need for this war to continue? Should they still go and support the Fourth Rakage and Lord Killer Bee? They exchanged glances and saw the same confusion in each other's eyes. In the end, with heavy sighs, they came to an unspoken agreement. This war between Cloud Village, Konoha, and the Land of Hot Water was nearing its end. In another part of the battlefield, the Rakage, in his lightning-release chakra mode, was unstoppable. His speed, strength, and defense were all greatly enhanced, and even basic ninjutsu couldn't harm him. Among the Konoha ninjas present, the only one left who could face him was Jeriah. In Sage mode, Although Jeriah's speed and strength still couldn't match the fourth Rakage, he was able to barely withstand the Rakage's relentless attacks thanks to his frog Q-might and the buffering of natural energy. As he used the force of the Rakage's punch to leap backward and create distance, Jeriah quickly formed hand seals and shouted, "Sage Art, Gomen!" With his shout, the two sages on his shoulders, Fukasaku and Shima, also formed seals. Fukasaku launched a powerful wind release, while Shima released a stream of oil release. Finally, Jeriah spewed out a stream of fire, completing the Sage Art, Gomen technique. In an instant, a fan-shaped wall of fire formed, reaching thousands of degrees in temperature, distorting the air around it as it swept across the battlefield like a tidal wave. Even the fourth Rakage, as formidable as he was, couldn't afford to directly confront such intense heat. As the flames closed in, he quickly vanished from the area enveloped by the Gomen, reappearing on the ground beside Jeriah. At this moment, the Rakage felt a surge of relief that he hadn't charged in with his subordinates earlier. Although Konoha lacked a proper Jinchuriki due to the chaos caused by the Ninetales incident, the combination of Jeriah and his summoned beasts could easily match a Jinchuriki's strength. And this was just one of the legendary Sannin. Besides Jeriah, Konoha still had Tsunade and Orochimaru. As the fourth Rakage dodged the flames, other Konoha ninjas joined the fray, keeping a close eye on him. Though the Rakage possessed near-beast-level regeneration and chakra reserves, he wasn't invincible. 7 or 8 years ago, Iwabikure Inoki had devised a plan to surround and wear down the third Rakage, who had the strength to physically combat tailed beasts. They managed to exhaust and kill him in battle. If they could defeat or even kill the fourth Rakage here, this war would quickly come to an end. Just then, a booming voice echoed behind the Konoha ninjas, followed by a blood-red figure breaking through the sound barrier, charging toward them at high speed. Lariat! The incoming figure was none other than Killer Bee, the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki. Sensing that the fourth Rakage might be in danger, Killer Bee had rushed to the battlefield, hoping to assist his brother. In response to Killer Bee's lariat, both Hayashi Hyuga and Choza Akimichi stepped forward. Using his massive, enlarged body and the 8 trigrams palm rotation in tandem, they managed to block Killer Bee's attack, but Choza was forced to cancel his partial expansion jutsu, and Hayashi felt as though his bones were about to break. Though the two had successfully stopped Killer Bee, they couldn't prevent him from reuniting with the fourth Rakage. As Killer Bee arrived at his brother's side, the Rakage immediately asked, "Killer Bee, why did it take you so long to come to my aid? Where's the rest of the backup?" "Big bro, about that." Killer Bee started to speak but was cut off by the Rakage's sharp glare, prompting him to answer honestly, "I was held up by an Uchiha and some kid, that's why I was delayed." "An Uchiha? One who could stop you?" The Rakage's face darkened. Killer Bee hurriedly explained, "Not just any Uchiha, he has the Mangekyo Sharingan. And that kid, he has an endless supply of explosive tags." "Mangekyo Sharingan?" Upon hearing this, the Rakage's expression became grim. When had Konoha gained a Mangekyo Sharingan user? They had hidden this ace so well, it seemed Konoha had intentionally feigned weakness to lure them into a trap and weaken their forces. The faces of the Konoha ninjas also changed upon hearing the words Mangekyo Sharingan. They realized the significance of this revelation. Chapter 195, Byakuya, the Peacemaker. For the Konoha shinobi, the Sharingan wasn't a rare sight. It was common enough that you might even pass by a jonin with activated Sharingan while shopping for groceries in the village. However, once the word Mangekyo was added in front of Sharingan, the significance changed entirely. Ever since the rogue ninja Madara Uchiha was supposedly killed by the first Hokage, the Uchiha clan hadn't produced another Mangekyo Sharingan user. After several decades, many had come to believe the Mangekyo was no more than a legend. But now, hearing the term Mangekyo Sharingan from Killer Bee's mouth sent waves of shock through the Konoha ninjas. At that moment, the air was pierced by a sharp sound, and Shisui Uchiha, wielding the Mangekyo Sharingan, arrived at the battlefield. Upon seeing Shisui's Mangekyo, shaped like a spinning shuriken, the Konoha ninjas quickly realized who had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Shisui noticed the unusual gazes from his comrades but disregarded them. He swiftly teleported to Jeriah's side, speaking urgently, "Jeriah-sama, the priority right now is dealing with the 4th Rakage and Killer Bee. We can discuss other matters after the battle." Hearing this, Jeriah nodded and called out to the Konoha forces beside him, "Everyone, with Shisui's help, we are certain to secure victory in this war." With those words, Jeriah charged towards the 4th Rakage. Trusting in Shisui, Jeriah didn't hesitate, and Shisui, in turn, disregarded the chakra cost, activating his Susanoo. A vibrant green projection surrounded him, transforming into a massive samurai wielding a spiral longsword. For many of the Konoha ninjas, this was their first time witnessing Susanoo. From its immense size, they realized it was a power that could rival even-tailed beasts. Emboldened by this, the Konoha shinobi renewed their assault, charging towards the Cloud Ninjas. The battlefield erupted into chaos, filled with the sound of explosive tags and the shouts of ninjutsu being cast, turning the area into an apocalyptic war zone. Among those fighting was Fugaku Uchiha, though his gaze kept drifting towards Shisui's Susanoo. His suspicions had been correct, Shisui had indeed awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Yet, when Fugaku had asked Shisui directly, Shisui had vehemently denied it. Now, with Jeriah in danger, Shisui stood resolutely by Jeriah's side. "Shisui Uchiha," Fugaku thought bitterly, "do you really have no loyalty to your clan?" Jeriah, who was still locked in battle with the 4th Rakage, was also puzzled. He remembered that Shisui had been on a mission with Byakuya to infiltrate the enemy. Now that Shisui had returned, where had Byakuya gone? Had something happened during his fight with Killer Bee? And if Byakuya was in danger, how would Konoha explain this to Hanzo of the Salamander? And, from now on, I would be using Japanese honorifics for all titles. While the battle between Konohagakure and Kumogakure raged on, Byakuya, led by the Cloud Ninjas, had already located Sasori and Kakuzu. The moment Kakuzu saw Byakuya, he recognized him immediately. Frowning, Kakuzu said, "Byakuya-sama, you're currently working as a mercenary for Konoha, while I am hired by Kumogakure. Shouldn't we be having a major showdown right about now? Your bounty on the black market isn't exactly low." Byakuya raised an eyebrow, his expression darkening as he replied, "Kakuzu, are you planning to betray me?" Hearing the tense exchange between Byakuya and Kakuzu, the surrounding Cloud Ninjas turned their attention toward them. Could there be an internal conflict brewing between Byakuya and Kakuzu? If so, this might present a perfect opportunity for Kumogakure forces. Kakuzu's expression was serious as he said, "Byakuya-sama, you once said you value principles." Byakuya chuckled, casually tossing a gold coin into Kakuzu's hand. "Is this enough to satisfy your principles?" Kakuzu grinned and replied, "You jest, Byakuya-sama. Money is my principle." Glancing at the anxious Cloud Ninjas around them, Sasori couldn't help but comment, "Byakuya, your nature hasn't changed. We could have met secretly, yet here you are, toying with their emotions. Compared to you, the ruthless puppet master, playing with hearts causes far less harm," Byakuya shot back. Sasori had no rebuttal. He had indeed gathered a considerable amount of corpses during this war, providing ample research material for the coming years. Kakuzu, who had also earned a good deal of bounty from this battle, simply viewed the demand for money as part of his character. After securing the gold in a pouch at his waist, Kakuzu turned to Byakuya. "Byakuya-sama, the war between Konoha and Kumogakure has reached a critical phase. Should we interfere with their conflict?" Byakuya replied slowly, "If we don't intervene in this battlefield, wouldn't our presence here be in vain? However, our small group lacks the power to influence the decisive battle between Konoha and Kumogakure. We need to wait for further reinforcements." "Our small group lacks power?" Sasori couldn't believe his ears. They were 3 individuals with Kage-level strength. Whether they joined Konoha or Kumogakure, they could shift the war's trajectory. Kakuzu seemed to remember something, a sly smile creeping across his face. At first, he thought Byakuya intended to use this war to profit for the Akatsuki, assuming that engaging in war was more lucrative than honest farming or trading. Unexpectedly, Byakuya aimed to manipulate both Konoha and Kumogakure simultaneously. Without further explanation, Byakuya silently gazed toward the distant forest, patiently awaiting reinforcements. Before long, several figures clad in fire cloud attire appeared before Byakuya. The leader was none other than Yahiko, the leader of the Mangekyo. Following him were Konan and other members of the Akatsuki. As soon as Yahiko laid eyes on Byakuya, he asked anxiously, "Byakuya, what did you mean in your letter about stopping the war between the Cloud and Konoha? It looks like a full-blown battle is taking place here." Konan echoed his concern. "What's going on? Did you really bring us here to end the war?" Byakuya nodded slightly, then explained, "Do you remember what I mentioned before? The war between Kumogakure and Konoha won't end until both sides are exhausted to a certain extent." "I remember, but Konoha and the Cloud still have the potential to fight." Byakuya smiled, revealing a meaningful expression. "Yes, they do for now. But soon they won't. If we can capture the leaders of both sides and threaten them with their lives, peace can be achieved." Yahiko and Konan's expressions turned stiff at his words. No wonder Byakuya had used the excuse of being short on manpower to summon them. They had previously doubted whether he was being lazy since his strength could directly impact the war. They had not expected him to suggest stopping the war in such an extreme manner, using the lives of both leaders as leverage. It was a method unlike anything they had ever heard of. Yet, it was indeed the most efficient approach at that moment, and they had no other choice. As long as they could establish peace between Konoha and Kumogakure, they were willing to try, even if the method was too radical. Mediating the conflicts between the five great nations had been a long-standing dream. Chapter 196, Do you still want to continue fighting? After reluctantly agreeing to Byakuya's plan, the group made their way toward the center of the battlefield. On the way, they encountered Konoha ninjas engaged in combat with Cloud ninjas. Upon seeing Byakuya and his companions, who were dressed in fire cloud attire, the ninjas immediately halted their fighting. One Konoha ninja recognized Yahiko and quickly said, "Yahiko-sama, are you here to support Jeriah-sama? With your assistance, Konoha will surely defeat Kumogakure." Yahiko remained silent, but Konan interjected, "We are here to end this war. Both sides, lay down your weapons immediately, or prepare for another fight." The Konoha ninja wanted to say more, but upon seeing the explosive tags hovering in the air, he obediently shut his mouth. The Cloud ninjas were also not courageous enough to mock them, unsure if these rain ninjas would suddenly launch an attack. With their presence intimidating countless ninjas, Byakuya and his group successfully reached the center of the battlefield. At this point, the battle between the 4th Rakage and Jeriah had intensified. Both the 4th Rakage and Jeriah, who were the main forces, bore injuries and their chakra was unstable, making it possible for them to lose control of their chakra modes at any moment. Although Shisui was no match for Killer Bee, his Susanoo served as an excellent shield. With the support of numerous Konoha Jonin, they had slightly gained the upper hand over Killer Bee. However, Bee's chakra seemed endless, making it difficult for him to be defeated anytime soon. Seeing the evenly matched situation on the battlefield, Byakuya couldn't help but exclaim, "Yahiko, if we were to kill all the ninjas present, do you think it could spark a new ninja world war? By then all the nations would fight over the land of lightning and the land of fire, engaging in a fierce struggle." Hearing this, Yahiko felt a rush of panic. He cautiously said to Byakuya, "Byakuya, you must be joking, right? Looks like I can't hide it from you, Boss Yahiko." Byakuya scratched his head and continued, "What can I say? I have a kind heart, I'm the peacemaker of the ninja world. Without me here, the entire ninja world would descend into chaos." As for Byakuya's self-praise, the Akatsuki ninjas present wanted to retort but found no words to do so. Given the current situation, Byakuya was indeed a key figure in maintaining the balance in the ninja world. If he were to truly eliminate the combatants on both sides, the ninja world would undoubtedly plunge into great chaos. However, whether it would be the nations attacking Konoha and Kumogakure or targeting Mangekyo was uncertain. The arrival of Byakuya and his group soon drew the attention of Jeriah and the 4th Rakage, both of whom stopped fighting. With confidence, Jeriah declared, "4th Rakage, you might as well surrender now. A few of my students are as strong as I am, and they have come to support Konoha." The 4th Rakage's expression darkened, but surrender was out of the question. There was only a dead Rakage, not a surrendering one. However, why were these rain ninjas helping Konoha? Had the Amigors secretly reached an agreement with Konoha? At that moment, Byakuya slowly descended from the air, positioning himself between Jeriah and the 4th Rakage. He said, "I'm sorry, but we are not on Konoha's side, nor are we on Kumogakure's side. We are here to do just one thing, to end this war." The 4th Rakage noticed Kakuzu and Sasori next to Byakuya and snorted coldly, saying, "War merchants like you sure have guts to talk about ending wars? Your Amigor must be profiting from both sides." Byakuya didn't deny it as he nodded lightly. "What you say is true, Rakage, but we are indeed here to end this war. If any of you wish to continue fighting, we of the Amigor will attack whoever it is." Upon hearing this, the 4th Rakage's expression changed instantly as he disappeared from his spot, lunging toward Byakuya. Compared to verbal exchanges, the 4th Rakage preferred the collision of fists. If he couldn't be persuaded through force, any words would be ineffective. Byakuya was well aware of this. Sensing the 4th Rakage's position, he moved to confront him directly. Before long, Byakuya felt the Rakage's overwhelming power. Each punch exchanged with him left Byakuya's arms tingling, and his whole body trembled. Is this the speed and strength of the 4th Rakage? It surpasses even that of the tailed beasts. Quickly creating distance, Byakuya kept a close eye on the 4th Rakage, suspecting that the Atsuki clan might have some Akatsuki bloodline. Otherwise, how could their physical constitution be so formidable? And, again, author is aligning Rakage with a clan even though he isn't. I remember reading same setting in another Naruto FIC, but I forgot. After all, his own bloodline was already close to Ashura, not far from the sage body. As Byakuya was astonished, the 4th Rakage was equally shocked. Apart from his father and Killer Bee, it was the first time he encountered a ninja daring enough to face him head-on. Who is this kid? Why does he possess such a powerful physique? If this kid teamed up with Jeriah, he might be thoroughly defeated. With this thought in mind, the 4th Rakage placed his hands on his hips, pondering how to secure more advantageous terms for Kumogakure in the upcoming discussions. Seeing Byakuya's formidable strength, many Konoha ninjas wanted to rush in and attack. In their view, Amigor clearly stood with them, and the so-called end to the war was merely a way to tilt the scales in favor of Konoha. At this moment, Kakuzu and the others blocked the Konoha ninjas' path. Yahiko and Konan also stopped Jeriah, solemnly saying, "Jeriah-sensei, please ask the Konoha ninjas to refrain from acting rashly. We are here to facilitate a serious discussion. If there are issues, they can be resolved at the negotiation table. There's no need to provoke a war." Jeriah glanced at Yahiko and Konan, recalling what he had previously said, then sighed softly, saying, "Konoha is the victim in this war, and so, we are naturally willing to negotiate. But the Rakage kid isn't necessarily on board. They are currently occupying the land of hot water and show no signs of wanting to give up the war." Hearing this, the 4th Rakage felt displeased from afar and retorted, "Jeriah, what does the land of hot water have to do with Konoha? We sent troops to assist the land of hot water in quelling rebellion. You are the ones who deliberately intervened in this war. Rakage, the land of hot water is an ally of Konoha, and so, when our allies are attacked, we must retaliate." Jeriah countered without backing down, firmly believing that Konoha was on the side of justice. The 4th Rakage sneered, "Is the land of hot water truly on Konoha's side? During the last Ninja World War, Yugakure was an ally of Kumogakure. It was you Konoha who assassinated Yugakure leader, forcing them to side with Konoha. Is that so?" Jeriah was taken aback. He hadn't known this key information. As Jeriah and the 4th Rakage argued publicly, revealing secrets without a care, the surrounding ninjas stopped fighting, waiting for a shift in the situation. At this point, Whether they could determine a winner or loser was no longer important to these ordinary ninjas. Then, Byakuya suddenly interjected, "Sorry to interrupt you ladies, but if you want to argue, you can wait until the war is over. You still haven't answered my question. Do Konoha and Mangekyo still want to continue fighting?" Chapter 197, Mangekyo and the Demigod. Jeriah glanced at his two disciples in front of him, then looked at Byakuya and the fourth Rakage in the distance, slowly saying, "Byakuya, Konoha agrees to stop this war." For Jeriah, agreeing to peace wasn't difficult. Konoha was already on the defensive in this war. Had it not been for Mangekyo's attack on the land of hot water, Konoha wouldn't have been forced into this conflict. As for the fourth Rakage's claim that Konoha had previously assassinated high-ranking officials from the land of hot water, Jeriah had never heard of it, but he didn't completely rule out the possibility. He and Hiruzen never resorted to assassination, but Danzo and Orochimaru might not share the same principles. Upon hearing that Jeriah was willing to end the war, Byakuya nodded slightly and then turned his gaze to the fourth Rakage not far away, casually saying, "Jeriah has agreed, but what about you, Rakage?" With everyone's eyes on him, the fourth Rakage's expression darkened and shifted unpredictably. Reluctantly, he replied, "Mangekyo also agrees to stop the offensive. I will issue orders for all Cloud Ninjas to withdraw from the Land of Fire." Seeing that the Rakage was also willing to negotiate, the tense atmosphere eased considerably. If they could leverage this opportunity to end the war, it would be a decent outcome. Byakuya smiled, forming two shadow clones with hand seals before walking towards Jeriah and the Rakage. As he extended his hand, he said, "I just love obedient shinobis. So, why don't we talk and have a cup of tea?" Jeriah grasped Byakuya's hand, feeling the vast chakra within him through their physical contact. This level of chakra was not inferior to his own. Although the fourth Rakage was somewhat reluctant, he also shook Byakuya's hand. At that moment, Byakuya spoke in a voice only the two of them could hear, "Rakage, let me share a secret with you. During our earlier fight, I was holding back. I'm actually not very good at physical combat." The fourth Rakage froze for a moment, unsure whether to believe Byakuya. Forcing the two of them toward the center of the arena, Byakuya was satisfied after they reluctantly shook hands and made peace, then returned to Yahiko's side. Yahiko nervously asked, "Byakuya, what should we do next?" Byakuya rolled his eyes and replied, "Well duh, we host the peace talks. Isn't that always your responsibility? Why are you asking me?" Yahiko was momentarily taken aback and then awkwardly said, "That's true. I almost forgot. But after our intervention, can Konoha and Mangekyo really achieve peace? Of course not. We are only forcibly halting their war. Even without us, this war would end within half a year. We're just speeding up the process," Byakuya explained to Yahiko. Yahiko's expression changed slightly as he said, "If that's the case, doesn't our intervention have no real impact? It would be the same whether the Akatsuki is involved or not." Byakuya shook his head, saying, "There are still some differences. At least Mangekyo has made a considerable profit, and peace has arrived a few years earlier. Don't forget, without us, Mangekyo would still be embroiled in internal strife." Hearing this, Yahiko took a deep breath and said, "Byakuya, you used to oppose the organization's ideology, but now it seems I'm the one hesitating. After becoming the leader of Mangekyo, I might not be as pure as I once was." Byakuya sighed, "This is the price of growth. Yahiko, go represent the Akatsuki in the negotiations between Konoha and Mangekyo." Yahiko nodded vigorously and then walked toward Jeriah and the fourth Rakage. Central Battlefield. Representatives from Mangekyo, and Konoha sat in a position created by Earth Release, discussing how to end the conflict and balance the interests of Konoha and Mangekyo. While a peace agreement might not emerge from this meeting, the discussions could influence future formal talks. However, among the numerous ninjas present, the most attention was not focused on the three leaders but rather on Byakuya, who had just dramatically intervened and single-handedly halted the war. The Konoha ninjas were not unfamiliar with Byakuya. He was a disciple of Hanzo of the Salamander and one of the senior members of Mangekyo. He had previously demonstrated his Jonin-level strength in Konoha and now stood capable of directly contending with the fourth Rakage. Though it was the first time the Cloud Ninjas encountered Byakuya, his figure was deeply etched into their memories. His actions today had been extraordinarily brilliant. Even if the other four shadows had arrived in person, they would likely not have been able to display such a firm stance before the Rakage. Byakuya's show of strength was not motivated by a desire to seize land or pursue commissions, it was solely to promote peace between the two major ninja villages. His actions inevitably reminded everyone of Hanzo the Salamander over 20 years ago. Back then, Hanzo, young and talented, had led Mangekyo in openly opposing the 5 great ninja villages. Although ultimately defeated, he earned the title of demigod for his efforts. This was also one of the reasons why Mangekyo was not declared war upon in the Third Shinobi World War. Now, Mangekyo had produced another figure reminiscent of a demigod, and this time, they came with a team. Among the crowd, Shikaku Nara occasionally glanced toward Byakuya with a stiff face. Choza Akimichi noticed Shikaku's furrowed brow and, while chewing on some jerky, asked, "Shikaku, isn't it a good thing that the war has stopped? Why the long face? Ending the war is certainly a good thing, but have you noticed those Akatsuki ninjas?" Shikaku replied. "They're strong, but what's the problem?" Choza asked, taking another bite of the grilled meat. Shikaku let out a soft sigh. These people have exhibited elite Jonin-level strength, even rivaling the 5 Kage. With so many powerful figures together, do you think they'd be willing to remain in a small place like the Land of Rain? Choza chewed thoughtfully. Go on. Seeing Choza treat his analysis as a snack, Shikaku felt a bit helpless but continued, Mangekyo's strength has far surpassed the limits of the Land of Rain. Moving forward, they will either expand into the surrounding small nations or launch wars against larger countries. They intervened in our war with Mangekyo for 2 reasons. One is Jeriah's request, and the other is to bolster the reputation of Mangekyo in preparation for future expansion. Even if we hadn't sent a message, Mangekyo would have undoubtedly intervened in this war. I just didn't expect that instead of taking advantage of the chaos to swallow up the Land of Grass and other small countries, Mangekyo would push for peace between us and Mangekyo, enhancing their reputation. It won't be long before those villages threatened by the 5 great nations will flock to Mangekyo. At this point, Shikaku fell silent, looking toward the direction of Byakuya with a gaze full of apprehension. Although Mangekyo seemed to be aiding Konoha, they posed a threat to Konoha's long-term interests. Byakuya also noticed Shikaku's gaze and responded with a smile that was not quite a smile. Chapter 198, The Reputation of Mangekyo. Since the first Hokage quelled the chaos of the warring states, Konoha had never seized any land in the 3 great wars. On one hand, Konoha often faced attacks from 2 or 3 other ninja villages, making it extremely challenging just to defend their territory. They simply didn't have the manpower to occupy additional lands. On the other hand, Konoha had consistently expressed a preference for peace and never initiated conflict. Although the Root organization, led by Danzo, had conducted several secret assassination missions against the leaders and Jinchuriki of smaller nations under the Third Hokage's orders, these actions paled in comparison to the aggressive land grabs of the Sand, Rock, and Cloud villages. This series of behaviors earned Konoha goodwill from the small nations, effectively making them vassals of Konoha. In the original storyline, every time Naruto undertook missions related to these smaller nations, Konoha reaped enormous benefits. Naruto's connection with the Land of Waves, represented by the Great Naruto Bridge, strengthened ties between the Land of Waves and the Land of Fire, while his friendship with Gaara made Tsunagakure heavily reliant on Konoha, effectively transforming them from a non-vassal into a vassal. To completely undermine Konoha, one would have to sever its connections with these smaller nations, causing them to turn to Mangekyo, ultimately allowing the Akatsuki to subtly expand their influence. Bringing his wandering thoughts back, Byakuya casually found a rock to sit on, waiting for the negotiations to continue. Just then, Konan approached him. Seeing Byakuya resting on the rock, she hurriedly asked, "Did you get hurt during the battle with the 4th Rakage?" Konan didn't particularly care about the future of the Akatsuki, she was more concerned about the companions beside her. Upon hearing her concern, Byakuya smiled. Did you forget I'm a descendant of the Uzumaki clan? The fourth Rakage's punches may be hard, but they can't hurt me. Upon hearing this, Konan finally relaxed. She then said, that's good to hear. I didn't expect you to really have the strength to confront the fourth Rakage directly. You've already left us far behind. Byakuya gave a mysterious smile and said to Konan, this is all due to my hard work. Konan-senpai, have you ever seen the sky of Mangekyo at 4 in the morning? Konan shook her head. To prepare the materials for explosive tags, I often wake up at 3. Hearing this, Byakuya found himself at a loss for words. It seemed that the level of competitiveness within Mangekyo was quite impressive. As the negotiations continued, several shinobis gradually joined the discussions in the area that had initially only been occupied by the 3 leaders. The crux of the negotiations centered around troop withdrawal, specifically whether the Cloud Ninjas would withdraw from the borders of the Fire Country or the Land of Hot Water. Jeriah and the fourth Rakage had been embroiled in a heated argument over this very issue. Jeriah insisted on the Cloud Ninjas withdrawing from the Land of Hot Water, while the fourth Rakage argued that they would only withdraw from the Land of Fire, claiming that the Land of Hot Water was none of Konoha's concern and that Konoha had no authority to interfere. Yahiko was unsure which side to lean toward and quietly listened to their argument. Just then, Fugaku Uchiha stepped forward and addressed the fourth Rakage. Mangekyo must withdraw from the Land of Hot Water and compensate Konoha with sufficient war reparations. The fourth Rakage looked at Uchiha Fugaku and said, you're the Uchiha clan leader? You have no right to speak to me. Send someone with Mangekyo Sharingan to talk. Upon hearing this, Fugaku clenched his fists. The fourth Rakage had the audacity to mention Shisui in front of him and suggested that he lacked the qualification to speak. When had the Uchiha ever faced such humiliation? He wanted to explode in anger and teach the fourth Rakage a lesson. But aside from Shisui, no one from the clan could match the fourth Rakage. If they intervened at this point, they would only become a joke. Thinking of this, Fugaku glanced at Shisui and said, Shisui, why don't you step up and fight for the village's interests? Shisui nodded and walked over to the fourth Rakage, saying, Lord Rakage, I am Shisui Uchiha. What the clan leader just said is correct. The Cloud must withdraw from the Land of Hot Water and compensate Konoha for the losses. The fourth Rakage sized up Shisui and then said, so you are Shisui. We can discuss troop withdrawal later, but I have a question for you. Shisui had already guessed what the fourth Rakage wanted to ask, but he still nodded and replied, please, Lord Rakage, ask away. If I know, I will certainly answer. The fourth Rakage stared intently at Shisui and said, Shisui Uchiha, where did the Jinchuriki go? The war is coming to an end, and Konoha should return the Jinchuriki. About that, Shisui hesitated slightly. At that moment, Jeriah spoke slowly, Lord Rakage, Konoha also wishes to return the Jinchuriki, but the Jinchuriki died along with the tailed beast and left nothing behind. Died? The fourth Rakage's eyes burned with fury as he shouted, how could the Jinchuriki die? How dare you and Konoha kill a Jinchuriki? Jeriah scoffed, the Jinchuriki has rampaged through the Land of Fire for so long. So it's only natural that she was to be put down. If Mangekyo wants to recover the two tails, you might as well wait for it to be resurrected. The fourth Rakage's expression darkened significantly, but he restrained his anger and replied, since the Jinchuriki is dead, for safety reasons, the Cloud will not withdraw from the Land of Hot Water. Upon hearing this, Jeriah was at a loss for words. While he was skilled in leading troops into battle and carrying out covert assassinations, he knew nothing about diplomatic and political matters. Realizing this, Jeriah scanned the crowd, hoping to let Shikaku Nara negotiate on his behalf. However, after looking around, he couldn't find Shikaku's figure. He could only brace himself and continue to argue the withdrawal issue with the fourth Rakage. After listening to the conversation for over 10 minutes, Yahiko seemed to remember something and said, Lord Jeriah, Lord Rakage, I think we should consult the leader of Mangekyo about the situation in the Land of Hot Water. Only he can decide on matters concerning the Land of Hot Water. Upon hearing this, both Jeriah and the fourth Rakage were taken aback. When had Konoha and Kumogakure ever needed to heed the opinions of Yugakure? Konoha was an ally of Yugakure and naturally had the authority to make decisions for them. Moreover, Yugakure had no standing to negotiate with Kumogakure. Among all the ninja villages, only the 5 major villages held equal status, the remaining small and medium-sized villages had no voice at all. To be blunt, even ninja of the level of the Sannin could easily conquer a small nation and establish a new village with the permission of the daimyo. However, after exchanging glances, both Jeriah and the fourth Rakage nodded in agreement with Yahiko's suggestion. In the midst of their heated debate, they could only consider the thoughts of Yugakure's leader. Normally, the leader of Yugakure wouldn't be taken seriously, but they had to take the opinions of Mangekyo into account. Although Mangekyo was merely a small nation, its military strength was only inferior to that of the 5 great ninja villages. Moreover, it had strong figures like Byakuya, Yahiko, and Konan on its side. In terms of influence in the ninja world, it was now comparable to the 5 great ninja villages. However, the leader of Yugakure was still in the land of hot water and would take some time to arrive, while this negotiation seemed to be approaching its conclusion. Chapter 199, Danzo's Suspicion. Hokage Building. As the third Hokage stepped through the door of the Hokage's office, he felt a wave of unease wash over him as he glanced at the urgent report scroll sent by Jeriah. The third Hokage had been closely monitoring the situation on the Cloud battlefield, where Jeriah was stationed. If the battle against Kumogakure went poorly, Konoha wouldn't just lose an ally, the already signed peace agreements with the Iwagakure and Kirigakure could also be threatened, as they might start to feel restless. Furthermore, Sunagakure and other small nations would begin to doubt Konoha's ability to protect them, which could lead to thoughts of severing their alliances. That was why he had dispatched Jeriah as the frontline commander, along with the Inuzuka, Nara, Uchiha, and Hyuga clans to the battlefield. Combined, these ninja represented nearly half of Konoha's fighting strength, sufficient to annihilate several small ninja villages. However, the third Hokage had no confidence in their ability to defeat Kumogakure. Compared to the other 3 major ninja villages, Kumogakure had not lost many shinobi in the last Ninja World War. They still boasted top-tier combatants, including the 4th Rakage, the 8 Tails, and the 2 Tails Jinchuriki. With their village having lost to Jinchuriki, Jeriah and the elite ninjas from Konoha might not even be a match for Kumogakure. Fortunately, in the last report, the 2 Tails Jinchuriki had already been defeated, leaving only the most troublesome AB combination. Perhaps they could only hope for new developments from Danzo and Orochimaru. With that thought, the third Hokage sighed lightly and opened the intelligence scroll in his hand. After scanning the contents of the scroll, the third Hokage's expression changed slightly. He rubbed his eyes to ensure he wasn't seeing things, then took a sharp breath. The report from Jeriah was so outrageous that he thought it might have been fabricated. After reviewing the scroll again, the third Hokage took a deep breath and said to the Umbu ninjas around him, "Go and summon the advisory elders to see me. Tell them we need to convene an emergency meeting." Following the third Hokage's command, the advisory duo quickly arrived at the Hokage building, with Danzo, the leader of the Root organization, also appearing in the meeting room, leaning on his cane. They all looked at the third Hokage, their expressions questioning what urgent matter could require their attention. The third Hokage wasted no time and placed Jeriah's report on the conference table. After passing it around, the advisory duo exhibited shocked expressions, while Danzo's demeanor fluctuated between concern and skepticism. After a moment, Hamura Mitokado hesitantly asked, "Third Hokage, is the information on this scroll true? Has Shisui Uchiha really awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan? Did he defeat the 2 Tails Jinchuriki?" Koharu Udatane chimed in, "Sarutobi, the information on this scroll is too exaggerated. Byakuya from Mangekyo fought to a standstill with the 4th Rakage and even forced him to agree to negotiations. When did Mangekyo acquire such strength?" The third Hokage looked helpless as he replied, "I have my doubts about this information too, but Jeriah has no reason to deceive us about such a significant matter. I prefer to believe that the information is accurate." Upon hearing this, Hamura and Koharu exchanged glances and turned to Danzo, who was still perusing the report scroll, his expression increasingly grim. The temporary cessation of hostilities between Konoha and Kumogakure, transitioning into negotiations, was certainly a good thing for the village, as it could prevent the already weakened village from suffering further losses. However, the current developments were entirely different from what he had anticipated. Danzo had originally intended to use the opportunity of war to weaken the clans within the village. He planned to wait until Jeriah could no longer hold out and then rush to the front lines alongside Orochimaru to gain credit for becoming Hokage. But now, before he and Orochimaru could reach the front lines, the war was already nearing its end. Not only had the Uchiha clan, whom he expected to weaken, not been diminished, but they had also gained an extra pair of Mangekyo Sharingan and the credit for defeating the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. What was even more infuriating was that Byakuya had managed to contend with the fourth Rakage in such a short period, allowing Mangekyo to shine in this battle. At this moment, Danzo could almost envision Byakuya's smug face, sending shivers down his spine. Pulling his thoughts back together, Danzo raised his head to look at the third Hokage and slowly said, "Hiruzen, while the cessation of hostilities at the front is indeed a good thing, it doesn't mean we can let our guard down." Upon hearing this, the advisory duo perked up their ears. As the fence-sitters among Konoha's higher-ups, they had never expressed opinions on major issues and had always adhered to the path of moderation. Because of this, they had secured their positions as advisory elders and had never faced any targeting from others. After a brief pause, Danzo continued, "According to the contents of the report, the reason for the ceasefire between our village and Kumogakure is not due to our or their willingness but rather the coercion of Mangekyo. While this is certainly a positive development, Mangekyo must have some ulterior motives for doing so." Ulterior motives? Hearing this, Hiruzen furrowed his brow and responded, "The current leader of Mangekyo is Jiraiya's student, who has shown a very positive attitude towards us. I've met Byakuya once and I think he is a youth embodying the will of fire. Under their leadership, Mangekyo shouldn't have any ulterior motives." Danzo sneered and retorted, "You've all been deceived by Byakuya's appearance since he is a person filled with darkness within. I have never encountered a shinobi darker than him. Moreover, regardless of whether Mangekyo has ulterior motives, they already possess the strength to threaten our village." At this, the third Hokage and the others fell into contemplation. Although Mangekyo had not taken any threatening actions against Konoha, they indeed had the capability to do so. On this point, Danzo was quite right. Seeing that the three acknowledged his thoughts, a smile crept onto Danzo's face as he continued, "To prevent Mangekyo from posing a threat to our village in the future, I believe it's necessary to increase the budgets of various departments. The Umbu and research divisions need funding for upgrades." When funding was mentioned, Koharu, responsible for logistics and management, frowned and said, "The feudal lords are already very dissatisfied with the current military expenditures. If we reach a time of peace, the budget will only be cut, not increased." The third Hokage nodded, saying, "The villagers are already under a lot of pressure, we cannot increase the budget." After being rejected by the third Hokage and Koharu, Danzo's expression darkened. He quickly stated, "We can discuss the budget later, but we must be on guard against Mangekyo and Byakuya. They will inevitably take action against our village." The third Hokage said impatiently, "I've said it before, Byakuya and Mangekyo are friends of Konoha. Danzo, I know you've troubled the Akatsuki and Mangekyo, but the relationship between the Rain and Konoha will not change because of your personal issues." Danzo snorted coldly, ultimately not bringing up Byakuya again. He shifted the topic, saying, "We can temporarily overlook the issue with Byakuya, but Uchiha Shisui awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan is certainly an internal matter for our village. The Uchiha clan has always coveted the position of Hokage, acquiring the Mangekyo will likely make them even more arrogant. And as for the events of the Night of the Nine Tails, those remain unclear even now." Chapter 200, Results of the Wood Release Experiment. When Byakuya and Mangekyo were mentioned, the third Hokage didn't want to consider the threat posed by Mangekyo. No matter how powerful the upper echelons of Mangekyo might be, their growth would be constrained by the number of ninjas and geographical limitations, preventing them from developing into a village on the level of the rock or cloud villages. Even if they achieved a status comparable to one of the 5 great shinobi countries, it could relieve some pressure from Konoha coming from the north. However, the Uchiha clan was entirely different. Although the Uchiha were allies within the village, they were also the most unstable factor among all the clans. Back during the time of the first Hokage, Uchiha Madara had defected from the village and even attacked Konoha with the Nine Tails. During the second Hokage Tobirama's time, there were also radical Uchiha like Uchiha Shin, who, dissatisfied with his master's policies, secretly plotted a coup d'état. Though this coup had been suppressed before it could begin, it demonstrated the Uchiha's ambition. Now, decades later, it was impossible for the third Hokage to believe that the Uchiha had lost such thoughts. Moreover, many questions remained regarding the events of the Night of the Nine Tails. Was the identity of Masked Man truly Uchiha? Did the Uchiha collaborate with the Masked Man against Minato? Or was the Masked Man possibly just Shisui in disguise? If Shisui had indeed awakened the Mangekyo during that time, he should have competed for the position of fourth Hokage. The third Hokage shook his head. He tried hard not to think about the Uchiha's threat, yet it was undeniable that they were indeed a destabilizing factor for the village, one that could explode at any moment. However, to act against the Uchiha without any evidence would not only go against the will of fire, but the other clans in the village would also feel a pressing threat and become estranged from the Hokage's office. With these thoughts, the third Hokage turned to Danzo and said slowly, "Danzo, I know you have always held a bias against the Uchiha, but right now they are contributors to the village. We cannot doubt them based on some baseless claims. Also, I heard that your Root Division has recently been actively recruiting but hasn't achieved sufficient results." Upon hearing this, Danzo's expression instantly became serious, and he shifted the topic, saying, "Hiruzen, don't forget what our teacher Tobirama once said, the Uchiha are a clan born of evil." The third Hokage's expression changed slightly, and soon the two began to argue. Seeing this, Koharu and Hamura were no strangers to this scene. Every time the third Hokage and Danzo got into a dispute, Hiruzen would always use his position as Hokage to overshadow Danzo. Danzo, on the other hand, would reference their shared teacher, Tobirama, using his words to counter Hiruzen, but the deceased Hokage could not compete with the current Hokage. Such disputes would often end in Danzo's defeat. A few minutes later, Danzo, with a dark expression, walked toward the door. As he opened it, he said, "Hiruzen, if you continue to indulge the Uchiha, you will regret it one day." Without hesitation, the third Hokage replied, "But right now, I am the Hokage." With a heavy slam, the door closed behind Danzo as he left the Hokage building, his expression gloomy and uncertain. He knew that every time he attended high-level meetings, the third Hokage would surely refute his opinions. But for the sake of Konoha, and to become Hokage, he still came to the Hokage building without hesitation. Though it seemed like Hiruzen had rebutted him at every turn, he had definitely kept Danzo's words in mind. This was the tacit understanding they had developed over decades, as well as their original agreement. He would bear the village's dark side, allowing Hiruzen to bask in the light. However, it felt excessive that Hiruzen had enjoyed a life in the sunlight for decades and had already retired from the Hokage position. Now, taking advantage of the fourth Hokage's death to continue suppressing him and maintain control over the Hokage position seemed too unfair. Tsunade and Jeriah were unwilling to become Hokage, which prevented him and Orochimaru from seizing that position. Did he want to remain in the position of Hokage, waiting for his son, the Umbu minister Sarutobi Shinji, to grow up, allowing the Sarutobi clan to become the next Hokage? With this thought in mind, Danzo, who had been walking along the shadows of the wall, glanced toward the sliver of light just a few steps away. He longed to become Hokage, but the power he had accumulated was still insufficient, and his aging body had significantly weakened his strength. Unless the wood-release experiment yielded results, all his efforts would be in vain. Half an hour later, Danzo arrived at the Root Laboratory located outside the village. As he prepared to enter the lab to inquire about the experiment from Orochimaru, he encountered him at the exit. Orochimaru wore a gloomy expression. Upon seeing Danzo, he shook his head and said, "Danzo, the results of the wood-release experiment deviated from our expectations. This time, the experiment failed." Hearing this, Danzo's previously relaxed expression darkened again. "Orochimaru, what do you mean by that? We invested so much money and manpower into the wood-release experiment. Why did it fail?" "It's normal for experiments to fail. I can't do anything about it," Orochimaru replied, his tone flat. Danzo locked eyes with Orochimaru and continued, "This isn't some excuse to embezzle funds, is it? The route will not provide any more funding for the wood-release experiment." Without a trace of emotion, Orochimaru said, "Then do as you please, Lord Danzo. I have no interest in the wood-release experiment anymore. The materials regarding the experiment are all inside. If you wish to continue researching wood-release, go ahead." After saying this, Orochimaru left without looking back, as he had other experiments to attend to. This large-scale experiment made him realize that the power of wood-release was uncontrollable. Unless a chosen one emerged, no one could survive the backlash from Hashirama's cells. Watching Orochimaru walk away, Danzo felt an unwillingness well up inside him as he entered the laboratory to collect the experimental data. Orochimaru was still young, only in his 40s. He could afford to abandon the wood-release experiment, but Danzo couldn't. He needed to obtain the first Hokage's power. As he delved deeper into the laboratory, Danzo looked at the experimental subjects floating in glass containers. These subjects had either lost their life force or turned into twisted wood-release monsters, some peaceful and some grotesque, all trapped within their glass prisons. Suddenly, Danzo heard a faint sound of crying and frowned. Following the sound, he searched through the glass containers and in an inconspicuous corner, he discovered a subject that was still alive. Although the subject had been removed from the glass container, they were still breathing. Danzo picked up the subject, feeling the abundant yang release chakra within them. A smile crept onto Danzo's face. Orochimaru's wood-release plan had not failed, there was still a living subject, and this outcome was unknown to Orochimaru. This was a tremendous opportunity for Danzo. Now, he could secretly cultivate the subject while gradually pushing Orochimaru out of the power center. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in part 8. Peace.